You and I are predetermined nonsense, and that's okay. You and I have predetermined consequence, and that's okay. And that's okay. You and I are locked into our destiny, and that's okay. And that's okay. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. You and I, friends telling nonsense. You gotta, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. 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 You gotta, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. Look out. And I are predetermined nonsense, have predetermined consequence. You and I, that's okay. You and I, friends telling nonsense. Look out, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know it. You gotta know what you want. 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 Look out, and that's okay. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You gotta know what you want. Look out. You and I are locked into our destiny, and that's okay. And that's okay. Nothing seems to go right. Melodies don't sound right. It's true. Days disappear. Shadows remain plainly clear. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. The door opens as it slows. I see a shade of something moving like a blanket in the wind. hear me mend. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beard slows. She walks by, and the spinning in my head grows. The door opens as it slows. I wish that I was pretty, more pretty than reflections look tonight. But I'm past the point of caring. It's time to make a moment. Let's not make a moment. This shouldn't be a moment. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. She walks by, the spinning in my head grows. When the door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. As she walks by, oh, she walks by, the spinning in my head grows. Watch it go. The door opens, and it slows. Closing sale, everything must go, nothing left behind, no wild oats to sow. It's out of my way, I'm done now, you see. You took the meat, but not my bones, now throw away your key. One foot out the door, persistent, you are frozen in time. Oh, I love you slips out of my mind. So sail, set sail, a little bird. Just go and set sail. Set sail, set sail, a little bird. Go and set sail. I'll take my ship away as the storm rolls in. I hope the wind is with me, and I hope you've learned that the pirate within me is sworn to the truth. Live or die by this rule. Something old and something new is the treasure within me. As sad as it seems, you will come to know what it all means to me. Set sail, set sail, little bird. Just go and set sail. Set sail, set sail, little bird. You just go now and set sail. So pictures and some memories, ones I can't forget. On the crest of my black heart, you best not forget that the pirate never loses. He always collects one way or another. Now you can clear up all your regrets of the time you set sail with that pirate from the sky. You will remember him until that day that you die. Set sail, little bird. Now come on, just set sail. Set sail, little bird. Now I want you to set sail. Set sail, oh, little bird. Now I want you to set sail. Don't forget to lose your mind tonight. Just watch me. Hello. Don't you think about responsibilities. Just feel what you want. Feel what you want tonight. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. We'll send you on your way if you say so. You try to, but you see me staring back at you. I'm staring back at you. So have another dance with me, my dear. Move your hips like this, it's clear. I'm what you need as a tear falls down. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. Well, don't you look back, you miss me. Don't look back, I'm standing under the street light at night. Don't you look back, try to forget. Yeah. So just walk to me, my dear. Look inside me, and it's clear. I'm a better man than him. I'm a better man than him. Then time stops. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. Well, don't you look back, you miss me. Don't look back, I'm standing under the street light at night. Don't you look back, try to forget. Yeah. So just walk to me, my dear. Look inside me, and it's clear I'm a better man than him. I'm a better man than him. Then time stops. It's the same road as before, and I wonder who I'll see this time. Just to touch the water and swing through the trees. Home is at memory away. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. Come to think of it, I've never felt so free. My tunes are a blaring, consuming that mountain breeze. It makes me so grateful to be alive. Home is a memory away. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home. Please take me home. Come on. Please take me home. Please take me You and I are predetermined nonsense, and that's okay. You and I have predetermined consequence, and that's okay. And that's okay. You and I are locked into our destiny, and that's okay. And that's okay. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want. Look out. or predetermined nonsense. Nothing seems to go right. Melodies don't sound right. It's true. Days disappear. Shadows remain plainly clear. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. The door opens as it slows. I see a shade of something moving like a blanket in the wind. A pretty little blanket, perfect to heal me in May end. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beard slows. She walks by, and the spinning in my head grows. The door opens as it slows. I wish that I was pretty, more pretty than reflections look tonight. But I'm past the point of caring. It's time to make a moment. Let's not make a moment. This shouldn't be a moment. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. She walks by, the spinning in my head grows. When the door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. As she walks by, oh, she walks by, the spinning in my head grows. Watch it go, the door opens, and it slows.
We need to be able to have conversations without feeling like we're going to say something that gets us thrown in jail because people happen to be offended.
Skepticism. Do you know what you believe?
All right, dudes, we are live. We are live with another Pangburn Hangout. Oh, yeah. Today we're talking about God, the universe, and Daoism. Oh, shit. Dao, what drove you to pick this toxic topic?
I thought it would be fun.
Yeah, it does sound fun.
It's a little scary. I want to try to make an argument for God, which is not something I'm known for.
Right. Well, that's good. Kind of the devil's advocate thing that Deniability's been doing on Saturdays.
Yeah. Pretty much Yahweh's advocate.
You're going to focus on Yahweh.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go I'm gonna go three directions. I think I told you God, nature, and Daoism. So I'm gonna try to hit those three, but I don't know what I'm gonna do for nature. Honestly, I don't even know what that means yet. I guess we'll see.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to send out a couple invites here.
Do you have a favorite argument for God?
A favorite argument? I mean, I think they all try to manifest something into reality that there is no proof for. So there really isn't a good argument for the positive claim.
So no real favorite. None of them stand out at all.
No, not at all. Not a one. When there's propositions that it's the same thing. Like I look at it the same as the arguments for invisible fairies, or the arguments for the existence of Santa Claus, the arguments for the existence of leprechauns. They all have no proof. So some people might bring what they call evidence to the table and say, well, this book is evidence because it does this, it says this and that. And I'm like, okay, if you want to call that evidence, but it's not evidence of the proposition, which would be proof. So all of them equally cannot meet their burden of proof. And they haven't even started to meet their burden of proof. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, I do have to agree. That's why I've decided that my favorite argument that I've heard so far has to be either definitional, or it's a what's it called, presuppositionalist. As much as I hate talking to those people,
right? And just to boil it down, the presuppositionalists presuppose a God. And they say that that's a better presupposition than the ones you are going to make and base your right and wrong on. And that's kind of the fundamental of their argument.
Yeah, so I am doubt-suing it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll say I'm adding a Kantian flair or something, or maybe
Cool.
a Petersonian. I don't really know.
Love it.
So
It wouldn't be Dao Day if you didn't Dao something up.
yeah, I gotta doubt-sue it up, man. If I don't,
Yeah. What up, Killian? What up, Doolittle? I'm gonna mute, and it's Dal's day, so rock and roll.
yo. Should I just monologue till someone stops me?
Well, I think Doolittle. Let's just make sure they're with us. Doolittle, Richard, Killian, you guys there?
I'm here. I'm trying to just listen this time as much as I can, and because I don't know enough about Daoism to argue about it. So I'll ask questions if I have any, but just here to learn this time.
Well, I'm gonna go three routes, and we're starting with God in the Western sense. Three languages. I should say that. I'm gonna use three languages, but I'm gonna try to talk about the same thing, and I think ending it with Daoism will tie it together. Well, okay, I'll just monologue, and if anybody has a problem, feel free to interrupt, and we can argue about it. Basically, there's Yahweh translates in ancient Hebrew to being or existence itself. And so God, by definition in the Western sense, actually is pointing, the word is pointing towards that which establishes the being of things. So the substance of the universe itself is the thing that is common between all things that establishes their being. This thing, Yahweh, being God, is by definition exists. And if you say God does not exist, or say you don't believe in a God, you're either falling into nihilism and saying you don't believe in anything, or you're falling into solipsism and saying that you only believe in the things that exist within your own mind.
Wait, what?
Take that.
So you're basically telling me that because of this, my atheism is just like it's superseded by this concept?
Yeah, your lack of belief, it would be a lack of belief in the being of anything, which we call
Okay. Now, the only thing I have, so if we took a kid, like it grew up in not even in a non-secular home, just a home where no one knew about gods. Like they're not like, I don't believe in a god, they just don't know. They don't even know that the concept of one exists. They're just, I don't know, some plebeian people that have no clue about it or haven't heard anything about it yet. And their kid grows up and he doesn't have any belief in a higher power or being like that. Is he? Where does that come from? Like, where does your idea work on that kid? Whereas he's like intentionally denying something that he doesn't even know has a possibility to exist.
I suppose at the very best, I would call him a polytheist because he believes in a multiplicity of things. If he doesn't recognize that everything shares a substance, but he does accept the existence of things, then he does in a way believe in God. He's just dividing that worship amongst the multiple.
Why would you call it God? Like why in the first place start and call it God?
I would say that was what the word means. Yahweh meant being in ancient Hebrew, and God is actually.
You don't think that could have been conflated with having a word before it, like a being or the one being or something? There's no chance that it was a missed in translation from Hebrew to English, which we know that there's not perfect translation across it.
Well, I'm not like a super studied Jew or anything, but I watch a few videos, and to my understanding, no, they're talking about. I mean, maybe some people refer to it as a being, and that is a sect of Judaism because that's kind of more the angle I'm coming at. But I'm more of the ascetic kind, where I believe in, or not ascetic. I don't remember. I don't know what the terms mean, so I'm not going to use them. I'm more in the direction of Yahweh doesn't necessarily have personhood. It's more of just the thing that allows everything to exist. It is the clay, and we are all pots. Every individual thing is a pot, but the clay is God. It's Yahweh. Being.
I don't know. That sounds really pretty, but I just don't see any evidence for it.
Evidence for which part of it?
Just one second. Is there evidence for the fact that, like, I mean, you can say, like, oh, this is all of this, like representationism and all this, like, imagery I'm painting in your head. God's the clay and we're all the pot. That's fantastic. But is there any way you can, like, demonstrate that besides just, like, no, I'm going out with him. Is it like, because I could say, like humanity is the bowl, or like, like everything is the bowl in humanity and everything is the food inside of it. You know what I mean? Like, I can make just as grandiose a claim with nothing backing it up.
Okay, so I can't tell if you're asking me to prove if everything shares one substance, or are you asking me to prove that thing is indeed called God?
The second one more like, is it actually a god? Is it worthy to be called God? And should we worship it or call it God?
Should we worship it or call it God? I suppose in this mindset, I'm going to have to say that you have no choice but to worship it, because in doing anything, you are carrying out the will of the one substance. You are doing what the one substance does because it makes you up. Like in
But we're not made up of one substance.
Hold on,
We're
maybe
made
it's
up of like
So everything is God.
everything is God, Nivik.
yeah. I mean, like, I guess if you take like the Christianity thing to it, like, God is all of us, if you like, however like they described it in Star Wars. So it was, like it he binds us and he's within us and all around us. I mean, technically, if I wanted to make the same argument, I could just decide, like, I could replace God with the Big Bang and be like, the Big Bang has created everything and it's within all of us and it's inside of us and it's around us. And like all of the things that came out of the Big Bang, all of the chemicals and all of the energy and everything, that's all of us and around us and a part of us, and so we are all the Big Bang.
I can accept that.
Yeah, I do believe that there are a bunch of people who would, or Christians actually, who would say that atheists just worship the Big Bang.
No, I don't. No. There's a difference between worship and taking things as it is. As far as we can tell factually, I don't sit there and go, "Oh, Big Bang, I'm so happy, thank you for everything." Thankful. I'm like, I'm gonna spend time out of my day to sit in 10 minutes and do a little ceremony for the Big Bang. That doesn't happen usually.
Yeah.
There's no place that people go and congregate and they're like every Saturday and they're like, "Oh, Big Bang, thank you for making us. Here's a really shitty song."
Astronomers tend to go out and study the.
Well, that's a physical phenomenon that we can like take a look at and watch changes over time and shit.
Yeah, and I would say that the people who were talking about being, 6,000 years ago or 3 or whatever, were also talking about a physical phenomenon.
So is it alive?
That sounds fantastic, but can you tell like what physical like where was it? What was the
Yeah, they were talking about being, as in like the fact that everything seems to exist and not just in our minds, but in like a space separate. Like when we're not looking at stuff, it seems to still be there.
Are we having like a first grade psychological problem about like object permanence? Like this is what separates us from this is object permanence.
Maybe if I introduce a little philosophical language, because I am kind of making a metaphysical argument for God. So I'm saying that there is the substance that exists that makes everything, and then there's our perception of that everything, and then there's this internal mental construction that we build based on those perceptions of everything. And so people a long time ago were struggling with the fact that their internal construction of everything around them didn't necessarily match with the actual thing that was there, and they were trying to parse this scenario. So they were talking about Yahweh being, which doesn't mean a being, although a lot of people take it that way, but I don't think it necessarily means that.
That's what I was going to ask you.
I'm not going to argue for the personhood of God just because that's really difficult.
I'm sorry.
I should, well, maybe not. I'm only gone 13 minutes. I want to survive
Okay,
one.
so it's a universe. Okay.
Yeah, call me a pantheist.
Natural pantheism is what it's called.
Oh, bring it up.
A lot of this to me is just like what somebody wants to call like a god, and that's okay. Like if like this is the type of phenomenon you'd like to call a god or something like that. But to me, it's like what a god is, at least in my head, and what almost everybody else would kind of imagine is an actual, whether or not it's a person. Yeah, whether it's a. I mean, I don't disagree with that. Religion's insane.
I'm
But
saying it makes more sense than other religions. At least it points to something. I say, like, what are you saying is God? The sun, our galaxy, the universe? Like, what is it
well,
exactly?
the sun actually isn't a terrible example of what a god would be to us.
Not bad.
I think it is because it's not infinite. It seems to have a beginning and an end. It's really big and bright, but it's not
Well,
all-encompassing.
until
But it
recently, we had
created us,
well,
so-
no. Until recently, we had no fucking idea if it had a beginning or an end.
Before
Humanity had no clue that the sun would end one day.
Except through logical deduction, by noticing that things around them and their time scale tend to have a beginning and an end. Like the argument
Something as grandiose as the sun
Well,
in the beginning was most definitely misconstrued as something that would last forever.
so
we worship
Aquinas, or no, not Aquinas. Who was it? Aristotle, the prime mover? Like that's Greek. That's ancient Greece. That's way long ago when they were saying everything has a beginning, and so the universe does too, and we call that thing God.
Well, see, but there lies my problem with like 90% of this. Why is it God? Why do we call it God? Like, because that kind of gives it autonomy.
it's a gap. It's a gap term, right? So if we don't have knowledge of all things, what do we call that which we have no knowledge of? And we consistently
unknown.
keep on. Well, yes, but unfortunately, people, to share knowledge back in the day, shared stories of what they thought it was, and we didn't have the methods and the balls to probably say, "I don't know," and we'll find out. It was just, maybe it's God. So we kept on putting in explanations through imaginative stories, and
Sorry, man. I just gotta find my
eventually-
shoes. We're ready to go.
and eventually we started basically an enlightenment movement happened where some people were just saying, well, listen, it's obvious that we've had natural explanations to account for all the things. Every time someone says therefore God or God did it or look under the rock made by God, we've had natural expectations.
My DVS.
Now most people are
Actually,
at
I
this
need
position
shoes.
where they say, oh, sorry,
They're
Kelly,
like
you're
kind of big.
still-
They've got the
you're hot
letters
micing.
DVS on them. They're gray.
I'll just mute them. Anyway, but now we've had natural explanations for things. So now is it better to say, is there just a natural explanation for prime mover, for initial cause, for whatever cause you might think there is, whether it's Big Bang, whether you think it's free will, whether you think it's the spirit, the mind, and the interconnection, love. There's a really good chance there's just a natural explanation because we've gone through thousands of recorded years of history to say there has been a natural explanation. So is someone going to postulate that they have an unnatural explanation or supernatural explanation, and we still have that in this world today?
By the way, we should do that too. We should discuss the times that we're in, where people were like that, and the psychology and the environment that they were in that could dictate their thinking. You know what I mean? Like what you're saying, like
yeah.
if they're limited to not knowing this or that, there's other aspects that should be equated into religion. I'm not like saying religion don't exist, but I'm just saying there should be considerations. Yes, absolutely. Of
Yeah, if you're going to say why religion, there's plenty of reasons of why religion, right? Like why?
Yeah, you explained very
these
good.
things?
Like
Yeah.
they didn't know many things, and they
What's your
substituted-
worldview? Yeah.
That's good explanation. I like that. People just stick on religion and they don't talk about, the physics of the environment and the psychology of people and how they interacted and with their environment, and why they might have thought the way they did and why they might have not thought the way they did.
All right, I definitely think it's time that I just because I don't feel like, am I still defending myself? Is anyone killing my version of God anymore? Because if not, then I guess I'm ready to transition. Wait, what?
I'm sorry. What's your version of God?
You basically came at the end. It's near pantheism. It's like natural pantheism. So like if you were to say that it's the god of the gaps, I would tell you that like science is not getting rid of any of the mystery that is in the thing. So when we do, here's my argument against it. When we do science, when we go about discovering the mechanism of, say, what should I do? Like a flat.
Does it have to be scientific? Can it just be self-evident also? Like, I mean, we don't use science to see the moon, right? We know the moon is there.
Yeah, we see the moon with our eyes, and
Isn't that science in a way?
No, it's not. That's something there's methods that we use. The scientific method is one of those methods, but you can have something equally, you can have third-party testimony be equal to the scientific method, right? Depending on how self-evident it is. Okay. So it's like I don't need the scientific method for someone to say, man, I stubbed my fucking toe. You know, when I'm like, oh, well, that's third-party testimony. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to, not, believe this person. Well, no, I mean, I can see it, I can understand it, I can see how their pain comes through, and I don't need to go through this huge, scientific method to figure that out. Same thing as looking at the moon, right? If it's self-evident, something that we can do ourselves, we can see that and we go, okay, cool. Those are the things that naturally explain it. But I don't want to cut off Dalsu.
Scientific method don't equal science, though.
Yeah,
it's just to prove something that illogically of taking this and that, and it's irrational. Irrationally it should, because what you have an understanding of one thing and an understanding of another thing, you based on that understanding, you think, okay, in causality it should therefore mean this or mean that, and then you go to the hypothesis in reality, and you see what if those assumptions that you've made based on your understanding of those things, if that's true or not, and the scientific method would prove it, but you don't necessarily have to go through it. You can just see.
Yeah, so there's 3 steps of the scientific method. You ask a question, you formulate a hypothesis, right? I'm sorry, there's 4 steps, and then you test it, and then the final step is a theory. But what I'm trying to say is that, I don't want to cut Dalsu off, because I want to understand his understanding of God. Because if it's just the universe, which I heard this from Dalsu before, which is my God is just the universe, then it's not really a theistic or really a deistic God, right? You might have a pantheistic understanding, but what's the difference between a God of what we colloquially term as a controller of everything, and almost an independent mind or a will, a nature of to control, right? As compared to just the laws of physics of the universe, Dalsu.
Okay, I'm going to say that the difference between the universe as we know it, the thing that science is looking at, and God is simply our ability to truly know the thing. So when we do science to discover quality of the universe, we are, what we're really doing is we're using machines to poke and prod a thing and see its reaction, and we build a model, we build a conceptual construction of what this thing is doing. We don't know.
Sir. Right.
We don't know for sure the actual nature of that thing. This unknowable quality, this substance that we can't quite get to the bottom of, even if we seem to have a fully working theory of everything. That is the true God. But even if I call it, this is, okay, I can't go any further into what I was about to say because I skipped to the end. So,
Is it
that unknowable thing, that is God.
So your God always is in the gaps.
The God is on the other side of the gap. There is our mind, then there's a gap, and then on the other side of that gap is God.
Okay. Well, here's a problem with that. That is a claim. Can you provide any evidence to that claim?
So I can say that there is a thing that is causing us to, when we look at a moment, there is this thing that's. Oh, I'm getting Nivik. I'm getting my stuff from you.
Yeah.
There's like when we're studying a molecule and it's moving around and affecting our machinery, we create the concept of a molecule. We map that concept onto what we see is happening. We call it a particle wave duality, muon, gluon, whatever the fuck. And and that's the concept we've built for it. The thing in and of itself, whatever that is a piece of God, or a small little glimpse of it. And maybe I lost your question in here somewhere.
No, I asked simply what your God was, and I said your God is just a God of gaps, and you're saying it's whatever, right, is pushing and controlling. It's outside the gaps, right? So it's outside the gaps, but it's pushing and controlling, right, this continued search of man to look for what is at the root of everything, right?
I guess I would differentiate it a little bit, because this thing is unknowable, right? I don't. God is unknowable. He's outside of the conceptual bounds of the human mind.
If you say there's a thing and it's unknowable, how do you have evidence that it's a God?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because God is the original term we used to define it. So you weren't here for this when I was talking to Killian about it. But basically, God, or Yahweh, the thing we call God, Yahweh was originally a term for being. So being, when they were talking about
Being,
not
the ultimate, the alpha.
Sure, it's the thing that establishes being for all other things. It's the substance that everything is made out of.
Beyond the mind.
Do you think
Beyond the mind.
Do you think that that we will eventually have a word for that thing once we discover it and it fits within our worldview?
I think we have a lot of words for that thing because we've been talking about it for millennia.
Okay, so then if you're going to use a different colloquial term for God, because that's what it sounds like.
I would disagree. I am using the standard framework.
The standard framework for God, okay, that most people use is of a religious mindset and of a theistic mindset, which means that it is of a mind that then has effects on humans, which means it is interacting with people, okay, and creating miracles. It's listening to your prayers. It's changing the course of your life.
What
What's
hold on. Let me. Causes your sensory perception, Grim?
What causes my sensory perception?
Yeah.
so what's beyond
What causes?
exists?
Vivek, what are you rambling about? Are you?
Oh, sorry.
No worries. What causes my sensory perception? My body. Like, I don't know how to answer that.
No, like when you perceive something, it's not just an internal reaction, right? You're like a photon hits your eye. That photon came from something.
It's my senses. Yeah.
So pre
My
your
senses.
senses. So before your
My senses.
yeah. So before your senses interact with something, there is still that thing incoming. You know?
Sure, I'll grant you that there is stuff outside of my senses. Sure.
And once that thing hits your perception, once it hits your senses, your body creates. I got a spam call. Your body creates a image, a visualization, a feeling, a sensation associated with that thing. And so all you ever
Yeah.
interact with is what your mind has. And so what I'm trying to say is God is that thing before you ever had any sort of mental conception of it, because assumingly it's still there, because they're like, what we're talking about is neither created nor destroyed. That's a concept that we have built around this thing. So it's still out there causing things.
Oh, okay. You're so it sounds to me like you're going towards prime mover, um, and I understand that, but our word for that is the universe or reality. Okay. And so I don't understand how you get from there, right, to say like, oh, there's a thing, because what you're basically, if I can steel man you, you're basically saying for there to be something, it needs to be grounded in in something that is constant, right, and never ending, right? So if we have grounding of reality into that something, okay, then I'm going to call that thing God, which is the colloquial term for God, the initial prime mover and the grounding that all things exist and base on. Is that what you're saying?
100%.
Okay, so if that's the grounding thing, okay, and you're going to say that's God, I can grant you that, but you cannot, unfortunately, you cannot give me any qualities, right, or any tangible descriptions of what you're talking about. Agreed? Give me a property of the God that you are talking about. A
And
single property.
I think this is a perfect transition because I have been playing Yahweh's advocate. I don't use the term God. I don't. I use the term nature, and I believe in the concepts of science as being accurate enough to wean out whatever little bit may or may not be there. Also, that I'm aware of some physics that might make it unnecessary for us to have this unknowable, ungraspable universe. They might turn out to be equally complex in some weird mathematical way, but I don't think we're sure. So, part
It's hard to
two
say.
part two of my talk is supposed to use nature terms. So I am going to transition now. God doesn't exist. I don't believe in God. I never honestly have in my life believed in a God, especially like what I was arguing for is the closest thing to a God that I could ever see myself arguing for at all. And it's essentially this ineffable, inescapable,
Mm.
like you can never get in front of it. It's just this concept of ingraspable, the thing that causes things.
Yeah. So in philosophy, you can't be certain of anything unless you have some sort of certainty revealed to you to show you certainty. This is called divine revelation. It cannot be um, demonstrated, unfortunately. For those that feel like they have divine revelation from Yahweh, from their God or gods, um, can't really prove it to others. It can become dogmatic, which means that they will not believe anything else or any other evidence put in front of them to disprove this. And so it is hard for those people. The other side of it is if you're trying to seek truth, right, a seeker of truth and a seeker of understanding, well, then you need to feel like you are just an experiment on a planet and you are slowly, as a child, figuring out your environment around you, which evolutionarily seems to be that we are constantly discovering and having to almost shift our worldview in many ways. I see we're joined by Dr. Doolittle and Leo Madrid. These gentlemen are scientists that do understand this side of it, and I'd like to see their two talking points on it when it comes to how we are discovering our worlds and how it's shifting our worldview, and what is that doing to our psyche, our mental state. We go, oh shit, I'm actually not part of God. I'm actually just a creature on a planet. I'm insignificant. I'm tiny. I'm smaller than I thought, especially given the vastness of everything. How that shifts us, how that actually moves your mindset. And then what are you going to learn tomorrow? I know Leo talks about his physics with AI and things like that. And those computers are literally going to shift our worldview about what we think we're actually in. Because keep in mind, when you're looking out in the universe, you're seeing it from a human's point of view. You don't see all the light spectrums. You don't see all the bending of space time. You don't see this. We've got this really cool looking at it, but real reality is probably a little bit stranger than we think. Things popping in and out of existence and all. So I don't know. I want to hear kind of what you guys have to say. I'm going to unmute Nivik because his mic was having some feedback. But I'm curious, Dr. Doolittle and Leo Madrid, if you guys could chime in on kind of your viewpoints of God and how science is actually shaping us to either maybe include him or exclude him.
I'd be happy to, but if there's nobody else ready.
Do it.
All right. You can hear me okay? This is the first time I've used this mic.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So this is actually a pretty significant area of my research. And my position is really from a more experimentalist position. And everything that I guess you could say all my theories and stuff are not, they're based on pragmatic experiments, not theoretical constructs and abstract ideas that can never be tested. And what I believe now, also when we think about the Word of God, and I grew up Catholic. My grandmother was like the president of the Catechism Club and was a teacher. My grandfather was he was like a big officer in their local Knights of Columbus. And so so I grew up in a military. All my family, most of the men served in the military. My grandmother was a World War II nurse, and I was I made it all the way through catechism, right up to being an altar boy, and I dropped out. And I actually had a major like mental crisis because I was told, this was when I was like 14, and going to church was mandatory in our family. The whole family did it, and I had a major breakdown in the church parking lot because I had realized that Jesus wasn't real. Like, this was all ridiculous. And from there I just completely broke away from the church. Never really even got back into it. But when I got back into consciousness research, I was like, wow, this is a lot of meditation, prayer stuff, very similar rituals in Catholicism. And then I came to the conclusion while I was actually looking for how to curate. I have a background in art curation, and I was thinking about curating shows around the idea of consciousness and how art movements happen. Why did Surrealism, Impressionism, what were the underlying drivers behind those things? And that led me to questions of consciousness. And so what I came to the conclusion after lots of experiments and stuff was our grounding ideas of, let's say, religion and God, for most of us, are based on a worldview that's 2,000 years old.
Hello.
Did I lose you?
That's fine. Based on world is 2,000 years old. What's up, Bear? Welcome.
I just heard something click. So it's based on a worldview that's 2,000 years old, and none of us can really comprehend what the world was like back then, and it may have very well been, radically different. And I would say that a lot of the things that today we would attribute to, spooky action at a distance and synchronicities, things like that, were attributed to magic and God, and 2,000 years ago. And if you look at the history of war and peace, and the fact that the Jesus myth is pervasive throughout all cultures, throughout the history of civilization, and I think there's underlying reasons why that. But what I came to the conclusion, I think, was these mysterious things that we attribute to God are really, it's just like what we would call synchronicity. And from my world perspective, I see the universe itself as God. Like, if you look at the Bible's descriptions of God, it applies to the universe: mysterious, all-knowing, all-powerful, yada, yada, yada. And I don't believe there's a higher being outside of our universe pulling any type of strings. And the universe itself is consciousness. And if you look out, if you look at, I think the fact that C was determined to be the name or the letter associated with the speed of light, that's not a strict coincidence that we also use that for consciousness. And so I called Gov. I actually wrote a small paper, a couple of paragraphs long, that I've used to describe this concept because it is the overriding concept. I've actually written not white papers, but scientific abstracts to the SAND conference, Science and Non-Duality, with this idea in it. And that is, God is an acronym, and it's governing operational dynamics. And so the mysterious things that people would attribute to gods are like slipstreams of consciousness that you can actually tap into through meditation, prayer, and some other things. I'll post the short document on the page somewhere if you like. And I would say that those underlying synchronicities, that's one of the areas that we're tapping into in our research with our coherent sampling. So I think that we could actually construct experiments around things that people attribute to God and actually break it down into a more testable method. But you're really, when you're getting into this, I think a lot of times you have to be careful which audience you're talking to. Because like wars have been fought over this forever.
People have kind of died for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I say something?
Sure.
Oh, what's up, Nivek?
Yeah, so God without the mind is the unknown beyond it. And it sounds like it's a bit of a mind job because above it's a bit of a mind job of the mind in saying what's beyond it exists. So that's an assumption. And because everything is interpreted through the mind, where you need knowledge and you need logic to know and understand what is true or not. And a lot of things are based off of an interpretation of an assumption. You get what I'm saying? Because people guide themselves through religion. But their conclusion is based off of an assumption that, of course, what's beyond the mind has to be God. So it has to be something great. But
Yeah,
that's all about
I
assumptions.
don't think that has anything to do with what I just said, though, in my interpretation of God or the research that I'm working on. Because it's not really, it's more, I'm looking at it from a more observable, things that we observe, moments of synchronicity, how to tap into those things. And it's really based on, has anybody here read?
But you get where I'm coming from, though, right? There's nothing beyond the mind.
We understand what you're saying. It's just a little bit
but people
off topic,
make
we understand the feeling of those who
people make their
who are
decisions.
dogmatic.
The people make their decisions off of those. So you need the mind in order to know, but you don't know, so you assume that's God.
Well,
and you make your decisions off of right and wrong based off of ignorance. You get what I mean?
Sort
So
of. It's more along the lines of this. If I can,
it has nothing to do with. It has to do with only the mind and what you know.
Right, but also has to do with relinquishing your mind. So just know that those who are
you don't. You're not relinquishing it though. You're making decisions. You can't think one. You can't. The mind is a factor. You have to have the mind has to be a factor in your thinking.
I understand that, but it is to sidestep Leo's point a little bit and kind of focus on Nivek. It is of the mind. Nothing. I would say everything is of the mind. Sure,
exactly.
But at the same time, there are things that are outside the mind that we're trying to perceive and understand. When it comes to religious faith, right? It's very dogmatic, which means if you question it, right, then you don't have faith, right? But if you don't question it and you just absorb it and you just believe because you believe, and that is faith right there. That's that dogmatic mindset.
How do they come to those decisions? It's to the mind. It's to the mind of psychology and how they feel and what they know. You know what I mean? You can't.
Because there's a soul. So they invent a thing called a soul, right, which is external of your mind and your body. The soul controls the mind and the body. Okay, so that's the part, which means basically what it's saying, Nivik, is that most religions say this. If you don't have grounding in your knowledge and your logic, in fact, you just don't understand because you don't believe. If you believed, then you'd have grounding in your knowledge. Okay. And so if you believe, then there you go. Which means give me your mind. I mean, no skepticism involved whatsoever. You're not allowed to be skeptic about this. And then I will show you God. Now, you could do that with a goddamn frog and make me believe the frog is God because I'm not allowed to question if the frog is not God.
Exactly. And that's where the enlightenment came in of reasoning, on questioning things and saying you don't necessarily need to know religion in order to know right from wrong. You can base those
Right.
decisions based off of
And you'll,
knowledge and
right.
logic and logical reason. You don't
And then you
necessarily
have
need
Aquinas
religion.
and Hobbes and Paine around the Enlightenment era that said, okay, well, this is obviously something different. And that's actually where we found the first actual true type of people saying that they're deists, which means maybe there's a prime mover out there, but it's not something that interacts with humans. We don't think the claims of men indicate anything about a god. So you start to see deists come around, the term deist come around after the Enlightenment era, where a lot of our founding fathers are starting to pick up that term, including Thomas Paine, who actually wrote in their journal, said, yeah, I'm more of a deist when it comes to these things. Atheist and agnostic really wasn't around, but it wasn't really a thing coined at anything.
You know what was happening? Because a lot of logical reasoning was bunking people's mythological thinking, because everything was done through mythology thinking. You couldn't learn medicine or, practice as a doctor. You have to be religious when it came to approaching things. And people who were just about, reasoning alone, they prove their point when it comes to anything. You know what I mean? A person versus a person that just looks in scripture.
Yeah.
So you could take if you're about being more knowledgeable and logical in your reasoning versus a person that's just about scripture, it's like you can see the comparison and counters of a person more being right in their argument versus a person that's not as much. And
well, it was more along the lines that it was your worldview. So there's a lot of people that, especially in the scientific realm, that just kind of believed. But once again, if you're not allowed to be skeptical, right, which is what a lot of these faiths teach, is that you're not allowed to be skeptical, then most people just believe. And they could be smart in so many other scientific realms. Like Leo sounds like a very smart scientist, right? But at the same time, he could believe in Christ. He could be a Catholic. There's plenty of people out there that are, because you're not taught to look into the faith itself and start. You can't prove it doesn't exist, right? But you can't prove it does exist. So you're kind of stuck in that middle point. So you're really not allowed to start practicing your skepticism and sharpening your skepticism in that. But you could be a fucking scientist like Francis Collins, who
in the past it wasn't easy
deconstructed the
though.
DNA code, but then found Christianity, because he doesn't apply the same rationality in those directions. You're not taught to do that when it comes to faith.
By the way, a lot of people in the past, they had to be religious because and by the way, that's mostly what they know. So,
not
that
be
doesn't
religious
necessarily mean
would be weird. It just wasn't a
Yeah.
thing. That wasn't thought of, right? There's people that supposedly had that thought and that concept, but to your point, Nick, it just wasn't popular, and you're not really going to go anywhere. And it wasn't taught about being agnostic or atheist. Was like a stance to just say, well, I don't know. You lumped your coal in with wherever the fuck,
Yeah, if you want to,
as a youth.
if you want to move away from norms, it was all about arguing interpretations of religion. You know what I mean? You couldn't just say, "Well, no, this is that," and no, there's no God about it at all. That's just how it is. You had to say, "Well, no, that's God's way, and this is God's way." When you discuss science and where you discuss anything,
sure, and that's still happening
or
today.
you'll be burnt at the stake.
On Capitol Hill, there are senators right now making huge decisions, very thought out decisions, using miles and miles and mountains of science and evidence and all this like that. But they're going to church on Sundays.
They refer to God. You have to do that. You better do that. Thank God.
They're saying, they're signing a bill and saying,
would like to thank God.
Spirit of the Lord. I know it's kind of interesting. It is interesting. You can have somebody take a Nobel Peace Prize in the fucking physics department, and the first thing they're going to think is God. Like, wait, what? Like, it's because it's dogmatic, man. It's dogmatic. You give up your.
But you got to give
up your
credit
mind.
to that. You have to give credit to that because everything positive comes from that. Otherwise, you're saying something against it if you do something and you don't mention God. You know what I mean? That's like
So the
everything
question
positive.
is, so the question I have for the room is it dangerous?
Is what dangerous?
Is believing, because you want to believe in a dogmatic way, like no evidence really that would amount to tentable evidence, right? So just believe because they believe. Is that dangerous?
I think being dogmatic about any mental construction to the point where you're willing to say that this is correct and everything else is wrong, I think that
Plans,
is wrong. That's always
Jewish rotisserie, Panama funds. Sorry.
I think I can make a case of how it's dangerous and how it's unnecessary time.
You're cutting a little bit out, Dr. Doolittle. What did you say?
I switched to my thing that has a microphone.
Okay, yeah, you're kind of cutting it out as well.
So I think I can make a case for how it's dangerous. So science is really good at exploring certain kinds of questions, and it's not so good at exploring other kinds of questions. So one of the things that religion is a good tool to explore, or seems to be a good tool to explore, are questions that have, let's just say, if you have to explore a problem space that is larger than the amount of time that you have available to explore it. So you kind of have to go with something, and if it, maybe be pragmatic, or maybe be brute force about the way that you learn, but you can't possibly explore the entire problem space, and you only get, let's just say you only get one shot at it. So, for example, if you look at COVID-19 and how people were treated in the early stages of our learning about the disease, right? If you're one of those old people in an old folks home that got COVID, and you can't, at that point, we didn't have the ability to use science to figure out what the best treatment is for that person, right? There were some doctors that had some information based on their previous experience, but none of them have experienced this before, and they only get one shot. You only get one shot at treating a person, right? So the science is not really good for that thing you only get one shot at, right? Science is good for something that you have the time and the resources to make experiments and refine your guesses and things like that. Religion is something that answers for a lot of people and helps them stay happy in their decisions when they really don't have any way of discerning what the right answer is, and you only get one shot at it.
Can I say something about the
So-
COVID people?
Hold on. I want to make a
No.
point to that.
Sure, I mean, but so it's dangerous, right? It's dangerous in that if you don't realize that that you can learn more about the problem that you're exploring, and you just stay with what your initial, I'll call it, religious presupposition was, then look at how we've progressed in treating COVID with science. Though science didn't help those first people, if we didn't use it to refine our beliefs about what was going on, it probably would have, the pandemic probably would have been far worse. But I mean, you could see people acting religiously the way that they were watching the TV show every day at 7 p.m. Eastern with the COVID update, and preaching to their friends about what Dr. Fauci said is the best way to act today, and restructuring our society around what the CDC said is the best way to act today, even though they know that the CDC didn't really have much evidence to, I mean, yeah, they have they're people and they have judgment, and they probably have good judgment. But how long was it before the evidence actually came back? Well, actually, we had already restructured our society based on their suggested approach before we even started looking at evidence. And then when the evidence comes back and it's counter to what they initially said, a lot of times people would squash the evidence rather than, and they would be dogmatic about it rather than learning. So, that's a good example of how our religious behavior can be extremely dangerous.
I've seen some Karens get pretty dogmatic.
Yeah, I think if you think you should be served a certain way at a restaurant, and if anyone serves you any other way, you're gonna throw a fit. I think that counts as dogmatism in some sense.
Well, like pouring the drink over your right hand, over your right shoulder instead of over the left.
Yeah, like if you go to
You did what?
if you go to a Japanese restaurant in Japan,
Oh yeah.
expect the same cultural norms, you're not gonna get them, and I think that's kind of the, like, to speak to what you were saying, Dr. Doolittle. I think it makes sense to create a story to explain the way things are, especially if you're like one of two parents to 5 kids in 5000 BC. And your kids are like 3 and they keep going, why, and you want to be a good dad. Like, yeah, you should be like, it's going to rain because it's all I've lived 30 years or 20. I've lived 15 years, god damn it, and I'm aware that it rains every winter. So there's a rain god in the sky, and he's going to make it rain at the same time every year. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to plant seeds for the rain so you can harvest them. And so I see why it makes sense to begin there, and you can begin saying terms like God, like create filler concepts. The problem comes in is when you say that this concept is correct, because I don't think like, to go back to when I was defending God or trying to, like, you'll never know that your concept 100% maps to reality, and you shouldn't act like, except for convenience's sake, you shouldn't act like that your concept 100% maps. But I think science, we can get closer to ever before. To go back to Leo, because I think Leo was talking about consciousness being a part of the universe, of nature. Did you mention that?
Definitely, but I could add something to this thing about, I guess, is it the idea that religion, the danger in like dogmatic religion.
Yeah, go for it.
So I think a big part of that is because of war. We have religion, we have God. For the large part, the myths around that is because of war. And if we think about it, anybody here has anybody
Why though? Why is the war?
Has anybody here served in the military?
Yes.
Who?
Negative.
No. Okay.
Doctor.
So
No,
To do little
Navy?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so was I. So I'm a surface warfare specialist, qualified engineer.
Okay.
And
You're
I come.
machinist mate.
Okay, great. I got out as an
Is that what you
MM1. I was an MM1.
You were a machine. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was an officer.
Got it. And yeah, so you'll understand some of this. So if you look at the history of war throughout time, not just what's going on right now, human beings are a warring species. And throughout time, armies have needed to be raised into the tens of thousands. Our concept of war today is tiddlywinks compared to what it was even a few hundred years ago. But if you go back Roman times, it was not uncommon for a battle to yield 10,000 deaths in a day, and 5 days later another 10,000. And 5 days later, another 10,000.
Nations would fall overnight.
Exactly. Hundreds of thousands of people could be slaughtered over the course of one onslaught in a matter of weeks. And so, in order to get people to go to war, I mentioned earlier the underlying myth of Jesus, and one of the reasons why that exists, and I'm not saying I disagree with this at all. I mean, it's just observing, you can see this, is that you needed to have a myth. Like if you take just the idea of Z or Jesus, but that name goes throughout many cultures. So the same idea is like a dude around his 30s, single, born to a virgin, a teacher, sacrifices himself. So think about the idea is when you're asking a mother to send their sons off to war, chances are they're not coming back. And so that's very much like this idealist. That's one of the reasons why you in Catholicism you worship the Virgin Mary as well, because it's the mother who gives up their son. And so a big part of military culture in all cultures is religion. And they all have that underlying theme of self-sacrifice. So when people go off into the military, they're becoming godlike or Jesus-like or answering to a higher calling. And without that, you wouldn't have people willing to die for their God. And that is, if you look at the Crusades and the myriad of other wars and times, God really isn't the reason why the people behind the scenes are pushing for the wars and to make the war, but that's the tool by which they can wield the wills of the soldiers.
The thing behind the scenes, they're making decisions off of things like that are important with science, in saying that you're to rely on God in order to take care of this, and God in order to take care of that would wipe out people too, like with the Black Plague, or now with the vaccines and a lot of with people saying that we should preach to God to take care of it against.
I don't know. I look at God as a system. It's a system of thoughts to where and it's all around consciousness. And if you've read Einstein's book on relativity, the one he wrote himself, there's only two things I would disagree with in it. One of them is that he says it's an easy book anybody can understand, which is completely false. And the other one, he writes, as well as most of modern science, from the perspective of a gravity-centric universe. And I would say that we are, like the Thunderbolts project says, an electrical-driven universe. And that electrical, like if you look out into deep space, deep fields, they look like neural networks. And all that is energy passing through. And so we're sitting in like a giant neural network. And we're a microcosm of our own consciousness within that. And so we have an individual consciousness, and then we're part of a collective consciousness.
Yeah.
So there is some truth to that, because if you think about how we are the universe observing itself, the better way to put it.
Think
our minds mirror the universe. Everything in our minds is a mirror of the environment that we're in. Exactly. So we are of that environment.
What other powerful beings exist in the universe besides us?
We don't know that.
No,
I'm saying which
dolphins.
Hold on.
Of our observable universe, human beings are the only ones that are able to build skyscrapers, structure society. We're obviously the highest cognitive abilities. So that's pretty powerful. And I have a series of posters that I presented at the Science and Non-Duality.
I can argue against that power, because if in a nuclear strike, the cockroaches will rule and dominate us all. All hail the mighty cockroach.
There, because the way computation works is in such a way that it mirrors. If
here's a math question.
Broke up for me. Also, you broke up for me.
Yeah, I didn't hear that last part.
I leave.
So
Can I ask about germs and bacteria and viruses and stuff like that?
let's
How
let's stay on
connected to
topic
it?
for a second. So Dull Soup cut out, so I want to hear his thought, and then Leo, and then we can go to Vivek, and Bruce just showed up. Kind of want to get his point of view and anybody else.
So I would basically say that the problem, like, it's not really a problem saying that computation maps to the universe, because I think it really does. Like, if you were to look at our concepts of abiogenesis or evolution, or even the growth of a plant, or your own body, you can map that to a sort of Turing machine like function, right? It's the same sort of mathematical structure as a Turing machine or computation. I think where it falls apart is when you start saying consciousness, because like the term and
Depends how you define consciousness.
yeah, it does depend on how you define consciousness, but I think, like, the same reason I don't say I believe in God is because I think everyone has such a different, vastly just so different concept of what God is, that why, like, it's not a useful term to say unless I'm just trying to have a conversation with people about it. In the same
No, they're connected. They're connected.
well, in the same way, consciousness is one of these terms that might it
No, man. No. When one person thinks one way, it drives another person to
No,
think
but
another
I
way.
would
It,
I would say
their interaction does that. So if I think
Yeah.
one, it leads me to do something, and that you doing something is in your outer reality, and that will cause your change. We are all our cause is the outer reality to me.
would we have the Enlightenment without religion? You know what I mean? It was religion that drove it in the things that it was doing, in people thinking, so they're connected. Everything's connected. I like the connected consciousness that he was
I
mentioning.
don't know. I mean, maybe not.
I use
Leo,
the
you
word
had a math question.
consciousness. When I use the word consciousness, I have a very specific meaning, and it's not. I have a written operational definition.
But we wrestle with our own minds
Well,
internally
I'm
as
telling
well.
you,
because
I'm telling you, I don't have that. You just said that's a really untangible thing, but when I use it, it's not. So when we're putting forth our inventions and stuff, and we use the word consciousness, we can map that back to a physical system. So I'm not using that when I say it. It's not in an abstract sense.
Okay, so my question would be, why use the term consciousness when people equate it to all these concepts that aren't as
It's operational because we need language to convey ideas. I'm a consciousness researcher, and I've specifically been working on mind-matter interaction and how our consciousness affects physical systems.
Yeah, but so can't you say that there seems to be a computational aspect to the phenomena we're observing in the universe? Because why do you have to go as far to apply a label that might fit it by your definition? But you could just say, you could use other language, basically, that's not as...
No, that's the right language to use because that's what our definitions say. So, for example,
the
consciousness, it's the sum total of energy that your body creates. Now, think about this. Here's a question that I think
What he's saying is that there are other interactions that could be that aren't described as consciousness, but who's to say it isn't?
no. So this think of this in mathematical terms, and the famous equation E equals mc squared. So if E equals mc squared, what is E if M is me? So you approach that to yourself and say that your energy, and you can call that consciousness, is E equals mc squared. M is your mass, and times the speed of light squared. Now ask yourself, how is it possible that you as an individual have mass that is specifically times the speed of light squared? That's how much energy you have in you. What does that mean specifically, and how would you quantify that? So that question right there is part of the driving force behind our research.
Can I say one thing? I think it could be this, our state of awareness of our senses connected to the environment.
Well, I'm
To
not
our
asking a
minds.
philosophical question. I'm talking about
No, it's not. It's not. I'm talking neurological. Your senses interact with the environment and stimuli
how would you
in it's just nerves, man. There's
how do
chemical
you measure
reactions throughout your
how do you measure that? So that's what we're working on.
everything we do is that.
Well,
So-
that's great, but if you're
The light hitting your eyes when you touch something, it's that state of awareness.
that's true.
It's so your level of that is just consciousness, because it okay. We have like how much billions of brain cells? The more there's awareness of your brain cells connected to reality, you have a higher state of consciousness. You have a higher state of awareness because you're being more stimulated, into your interaction with the environment. That's called that's seen as a form of knowledge. You make connections, and those brain cells more being stimulated in interaction with the environment is a higher level of consciousness. It's a high level of awareness.
So there's actually another theory on consciousness, and I'd still like to hear the rest of the room. And of course, he and Bruce just showed up, and Dylan M and Scott. But there's actually another theory that showed up, which was we have these cells in our brain that are tuning into frequencies in the universe, and those cells specifically are basically setting the tone when it comes to the alpha and the beta and the theta brain patterns that we have. Huh?
Are you talking about microtubules?
Believe so. Yeah, I don't know too much about it. Leo, you're too advanced for us, so you're gonna have to layman's turn the fuck out of it. You've got a fucking AI machine in the background behind you, and you work on the hard problem of consciousness, like from a scientific standpoint. So I get it. You're more than well qualified than any of us on this shit. But there is interesting
When you
studies
your
when it
head,
comes
you're
to
not
that
as
stuff.
conscious, right?
Yeah, and we're not going to solve the hard problem of fucking consciousness tonight. It's just not something, but it
Not
is
tonight.
interesting to
Can I say something about that though?
Go ahead, and then I want to hear where Bruce and Corsi,
No, I'm asking a
they
question.
intertwine that consciousness with God and all that, because I think Bruce and Corsi have completely two different
Hey,
outlooks on this
before you
When
do
you
that,
have-
just Grim, just keep in mind that this is Dal's day, right?
stuff. I don't want to
He's
take
ru-
over
he's running the
Dow's
room.
thing. My bad.
Oh, what?
Dow's
I sort of jumped into the half. I don't know.
Asking a
Yeah,
question about
so
consciousness.
let's
though.
stay on topic, and Dal
Ju-
will be able to
Just
keep
a quick
us there.
question.
Yeah,
I want to ask the conscious guy. Oh, well, so if you hit your head, your level of consciousness, it's down, and if your mind's not exposed to environment and learning, like you were locked into a closet, you know what I mean? Would you'd be have less of a state of awareness, right? I mean,
wouldn't say
because
that
you would
at
be
all.
more if you don't hit so if you do have brain damage, your level of consciousness won't go down. It's the same consciousness.
I wouldn't say that at all. And are you speaking like hypothetically speaking?
Well, yeah, I'm just it's just a hypothesis.
Okay, well, let me give
if you
you
hit your
let me give you a real world example, and that is in 2007, I had a traumatic brain injury that left me with 100% retrograde amnesia. So I lost my memory completely. And so I don't think you could tell me that was a loss. I mean, I certainly lost stuff, but I don't think I would not say that was a lower level of consciousness or I somehow became less conscious.
okay,
I would
but
argue
you
that
weren't as aware. You're messed up at the
hey
time, right?
Nivik,
But your brain's
Nivik,
made neural
no,
connections.
Nivik, no follow-up questions, man. This is off topic. Dal,
Okay.
where did you want to take it next?
Well,
You got a couple new people in the room, so
that's true. Did I kind of moved away from the God topic. I did want to get Bruce's opinion on my argument for God because it is my favorite, and I know he's really into technology, and and it'd be dope. So if you're there, I'll go back to that for a bit.
What? Yeah, I'm here. What's up?
So I was trying to argue for the other side for a change, and my argument basically goes, and I get the feeling you're not gonna like it, but it basically goes,
Okay.
I go before I'm basically arguing for Judaism. So I bring up Yahweh and I say that originally translated to being, and that people back then were talking about the existence of things and what causes things to exist. And so, and then I kind of went to a Kantian perspective where the things in and of themselves that are outside of our mind that cause these qualities to appear to us, that thing is in fact the thing that is being itself. It's the actual thing that exists, and so that is God, and the rest is simply our mind's construction of the best. It's like our best comprehension of our vision of God. That's I think the best
Okay.
I got.
Okay. I mean, I would. Okay. I mean, are you asking me if I agree with that, or what do you think?
It's more of a what do you think, just because I know you're
Oh,
more studied than me in this area, it seems. I've talked to you a few times.
yeah. Well, I mean, I would say like the way I work that out is probably how a lot of people in Reformed theology work it out, which is man's mind is derivative. So like it's surrounded by nothing but uh, revelational experiences and revelation. So like it can't be conscious of itself without being conscious of its creatureliness. Like so, like for self-conscious presupposes God's consciousness in my world. It's an inescapable sense of God. Or, Adam in paradise, Adam in Eden, um, uh, couldn't necessarily exist without understanding his creatureliness. So that's how I would work that out. You're constantly in contact with God's revelation, like all the time. Your mind is totally derivative. That's
Yeah,
how I work that out.
it sounds like we agree, except I don't. I wasn't assigning consciousness just because I wouldn't know how to argue for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next phase of the conversation was going to be nature in general, and because we were doing this, I wanted to. I'm trying to come from.
I just lost Al Sud. Anyone else?
Whoops. I want to try to
Alright.
from the angle of modern science. So when we were talking about I wanted to go back to consciousness because we were talking about the universe having this quality of consciousness. If Leo's still there, I can't check.
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. So would you say that the consciousness that you're talking about that we're looking at in the universe is necessarily like at a big scale, or do you think, because like panpsychism tends to take the view that like the smallest substance, the very substance itself is consciousness. Is that what you're saying? Like energy and mass is all consciousness?
No, absolutely not. And I would say it probably, my thoughts fall along the lines of the Rosicrucian perspective of this, and that is we kind of have a soul and a spirit. There's soul and spirit. The soul is what a living thing has, where and I consider that if you're conscious, if you reproduce, if you seek food, nutrients, and you reproduce, you have a level of consciousness. And then spirit is that underlying vibrational resonance that would Michio Kaku's string theory would apply to in here, is that pervasive oneness of all matter. So human beings, we have soul and spirit, but the table that I'm sitting at only has spirit. So when I talk about consciousness, there's a connection to the spirit of the earth, the non-matter, but there's a higher level of connection to consciousness. So like we all come from families, right? And so we have a collective consciousness that we share from our family, and that's how you know your mom's calling before she's going to call and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a collective consciousness where all the different groups were a part in, and then there's a global collective consciousness, here on Earth, and then we're connected on a larger scale to the consciousness of the universe. I would say in our sun is the main catalyst of that. So there's quite a few papers and stuff actually written about the sun being conscious, and I don't subscribe to any one, but I would say that all of our life on Earth and energy comes from the sun, and we're consciousness, so we're tied into that. And that light is one of the primary catalysts of that of the entanglement that we all have with each other. And so when I think of consciousness, I think of it in a physical system with because that was if who the engineer there, I think of a ship as being like a human being has consciousness. Like if you ask, say, what's the important part of the warship, it depends on who you ask, but you can't, if you're the captain of the ship, you can't think of which is the most important because you need the whole thing to work. It's systemic, so like like a ship, you have the Ives, like the bridge, you have the CIC, that's the Combat Information Center, that's like the brain, and then you have the engineering plant, which is the heart. And they all work in tandem together to maintain a system of war for the ship. And then on your body, it's a system of consciousness that maintains.
So the mind plus the environment is consciousness.
Well, we're tapped into that. There's a collective consciousness. So let's say if you go out on a hike out into the trees and you go into a deep meditative state and you're tapping into nature, you're tapping into that collective consciousness as well as the human consciousness, whoever you're with or not with, or whatever. But there's two different levels going on there. If you got your dog and you're taking your dog, there's some dog consciousness worked in there, and it's all systemic, and it's all, when you break it down, it's all energy and data flow.
Fuck me, man.
Yeah, so you're saying me as a physical system, like obviously I'm not a closed system, so your definition of consciousness doesn't require a closed system.
Correct.
And the emergent property of the interactions of the chemistry that makes up my body, we call that, you're calling all of that consciousness, right?
Yeah, I would say if you could sum total all the energy. So there's, I don't remember what it is, but somebody did an approximation of how much energy is in a brain neuron firing. So if you take that, average how many neurons you're running, measure it, you could throw in your heart rate variability, and then how much voltage your heart is putting out, you could actually come up and quantify you're a person of consciousness at this level. This is how much energy. I know that I can hook up a machine to turn every human being into a human being into a battery. We can literally measure the flow of consciousness to an extent, and affect that and affect it.
See, I feel like this is where
This is where Skynet turns online.
Yeah.
But when my primary motivation was getting into this was the Pear Labs, they have found an anomaly where when people came in contact with these electron tunneling devices, they acted a little bit different. And so there was this whole question about consciousness around that thing. And so when I'm describing these systems, I'm describing the system by which is affecting our computers, right? Because we know it affects it. And so I had to come up with the reasoning how and why. And I kind of take a military approach to it in the sense that it's got to work first. Doesn't matter if you can't test it. And so most of science, like Michio Kaku, I loved his book. I like him. He's a really good, cool guy. But again, his belief system is grounded in 40-year-old, 50-year-old discoveries, even older than that, really. And yeah. So their question, but this kind of leads me to one of the reasons why I joined this group and want to be a part of this is I led a team through the X Prize, and we became an alumni. So we actually completed a very arduous artificial intelligence competition, and we got invited to the inner circle of some of the greatest thought leaders in the world today. And they just started an initiative for the alumni, to name the next big prize, and it's a $10 million prize. And so internally they're doing this, and I want to do the theory of everything consciousness X prize and invite math and because although I think it's an important exercise to think abstractly and to brainstorm and think in the most wildest terms possible, but it's also important to be able to bring those things back to a testable theory. And so what Michio Kaku and most of his friends are bought into are theories that can't be tested. And I think they're taking society on a wild goose chase, personally. And he even said it in his book, they can't be tested. These are just pet theories they want to see done before they're alive. But one of the things he said in his book that I thought was just the most condescending thing, and it's the most unscientific perspective, I think, but Sabine Hofstadter has the same thing in her book, and that is they think that they thought of all the easy ideas. All the easy ideas have been thought about. All the simple solutions have either been examined or dismissed, and the only thing left is big, giant, abstract, crazy ideas that can never be tested. So because they already think that they already came up with all the pragmatic stuff. So they're obsessed with the very big and the very small, while completely not addressing some of the biggest mysteries of how we perceive and work with each other. Stuff like that.
Because I want an understanding of now. You know what I mean? The explaining, because that's kind of like why I'm on the forum. It's like I like to get understanding of why things are the way they are now, in gathering as much information in order to more have an idea how to move ahead. You know what I mean? And
you realize why they say that, right? You realize why they say that the easy things have been discovered and the hard things are left. It's not that they're saying that, there's nothing to be discovered. It's that, like, we have an understanding about the energy levels required to test certain theories, and they have been constantly practical in an engineering sense. But right now, we're reaching kind of our theories are moving past beyond the levels we're able to test just in a technological sense. So it's not that they're not valid. It's just, yes, it was, we can make linear colliders. CERN was created and we've tested and we've confirmed the Higgs boson. Like these are things we have done, but like these other theories, it's not that they're not valid or we're somehow dismissing like other ideas. Is that we recognize that yes, new ideas are going to take exponentially harder and harder, like experimental technological advancements. Like, but why should we expect it to be any different? Obviously,
the opposite. I think it's the opposite. I think it takes patience.
Yeah, I'd have to say that. So we need. I agree with.
no, he's talking relevance though.
I agree with Overdroid. Overdroid? Is that your name?
Yeah, Underdroid.
Underdroid. Yeah, I agree with you. Like everything that we have interacted with, as far as the laws goes and all that sort of stuff, has a concept built for it. And so, unless you're discovering a new thing and building a new concept to map this new thing, you're not really in Sabine's and a lot of people's eyes contributing to science. You're more so setting up a theoretical framework that could explain things. So people
and
like
that right there. I'm saying right there is the fallacy that science has been guilty of all through the ages. If you go back,
it's not a fallacy.
Go back 120 years. Go back 120 years. There are papers written by PhDs, peer-reviewed papers, arguing that flight cannot be achieved. That we're a terrestrial being and we'll never be in space.
No one has ever thought flight cannot be achieved. Whoever said flight cannot be achieved? Wait, okay. Look, before humans literally Neanderthals saw birds flying. There's absolutely no single human being that ever thought flight was impossible. Every single human being looked at birds, realized yes, it's a physical possibility to fly. So human beings have tried to develop technology enough to fly. Like no human being has ever said it's impossible to fly. Like that's insane.
Hold on, hold on. That's also a false equivalency because I'm not saying that you can't do something. I'm saying that renaming something is not actually science. Like saying that these systems are consciousness, it to me isn't science. That's just if that way of looking at it leads to a discovery, then
Hello?
I honestly, I honestly think we should explore those sorts of things. Like,
Well, what I think the point I'm getting is I love the collider, and I think we should build bigger telescopes and put more power. The fallacy is thinking that is the only answer, that the bigger stuff, and that they've already looked at the easy stuff, and that is the fallacy and completely untrue.
well, I think
that completely removes the art of invention and completely also dismisses the history of science and how great discoveries actually come into play.
Right. But science, doesn't know everything, but it knows something. So when we talk about things like unifying gravity with general relativity, and we realize gravity is the weakest force, weakest force in the universe, and the problem is to probe the weakest force requires an energy level. So if we're going to have a particle collider that's going to probe like a graviton, it's going to take a particle collider the size of the entire galaxy. So this is an actual scientific calculation, right? So unfortunately right now our biggest problems aren't discovering protons, neutrons, like quarks or electrons. Our biggest problems are how we're going to unify, general relativity with quantum mechanics. So when we're going to probe these levels, we understand it's going to take a technology that right now we're not even close to having. So it's not that. Yeah, it's not that we're dismissive of discoveries. We understand our discoveries are becoming exponentially more difficult to reach.
yeah,
Would you like me to give you an example of why that's not completely accurate?
Yeah,
and it's where I'm sitting in right now. You just actually named one of my hotspots, and that is and this is in Michio Kaku's book as well. He talks about the unification between relativity and quantum mechanics. That is a quest. I think it's on page 140 or something. I'm looking at the notes here. That's been a quest of science for very long. And there's two elements of relativity, general and special, as defined by Einstein, right? And but that's not the ultimate, I guess you could say, framework for relativity, because even when he came up with it, it wasn't general and special came to him all at the same time. So it was built upon. So the construct of time was built upon. So I have an invention. I'm sitting in this room with it that we published and ran through all the technical stuff we needed to, that unifies relativity and quantum mechanics in a functional form of artificial intelligence. And most people, when they think of relativity, they think special and general. And so when they're hearing about the unification of quantum mechanics and relativity, they're either thinking planets and stars or atomic clocks and movement and time dilation, and how the satellites sync with each other, and that the answers are either very, very small or very, very big. Right. So this is an example of what I'm saying, where a lot of the people who are what you would consider thought leaders or the establishment, they are in many ways not even capable of, because they all have their worldview. I mean, the idea that, I think this is one of the biggest fallacies in science, and that is the idea, because it looks like for many discoveries, they just throw the scientific method out and it just becomes about politics. Because Michio Yukio brought this up in his book, and we all know about this. Like science progresses one death at a time, one funeral at a time.
Can I say one thing? Yeah, yeah. You want as much perspectives as possible to get an understanding in where we are now, and in an understanding of how things are the way now. You have to look in the past and get as much information in causality and understanding
Yeah,
our
go ahead.
presence now, and then have an idea how to move forward into the future and how could you use science to do that, because in the past there's scientific revolutions, you know what I mean, that change things, like, you know, so like how what's the relevancy is in relations to now, in regards to you know the world, and how to use science to move forward.
Underjoyed, go ahead.
Yeah, you said you're using artificial intelligence as a technology to unify general relativity and quantum mechanics.
I did not say
I
that.
would. Okay, you said you had a project that used artificial intelligence that was being ignored by the scientific community.
Well, no. What I didn't say was general. I didn't say anything about special or general relativity. That we did it. I said we unified the laws of quantum mechanics and relativity, and it does include. But I didn't do that, and I actually we've called this spatial relativity because it doesn't require a second frame of reference. It's a stationary object, and if general and special relativity are generally describing things in motion. And so we did that in a form of artificial intelligence, yes. And I wouldn't say that everybody's ignoring it, but what I'm saying is people who have their brain, like I did speak with some guy. Yeah.
So the problem of unification is the unification of quantum mechanics and general relativity. That is specific.
Well, no,
that's specific.
Yeah. There's that, and you will see.
Okay, yeah, the curvature space time and the quantization of particle physics. Like this is a big problem.
That's not what I'm doing at all.
Right, but this, like, so what else? So what
Leo's
problem are you trying to solve? And when you use the word artificial intelligence, this is such a red flag to anyone that, you know, is in the field. Like, I mean, like, what do you mean by artificial intelligence? Do you mean like a program you wrote, or like, what do you mean by that? How exactly are you using artificial intelligence to do anything you're talking about right now?
All right, you need to get a seatbelt on.
Yeah. Because I hear a little attitude there.
Yeah, attitude is welcome here. I mean, he's challenging, and yeah, Underjoyed, keep it within good faith. But you know, Leo, you've made a lot of bold claims on the air here, so I think Underjoyed is challenging you.
Okay, so I would say, and I would agree with you, people generally use the term artificial intelligence incorrectly. I would say that most people, when they use the the phrase artificial intelligence, what they really mean is machine learning. And my background does include statistical process control, and I was a total quality leadership facilitator in the military. And then I worked in the semiconductor industry as a corporate trainer for Micron Technology, which at the time was still a very big semiconductor maker. And so I understand the difference between machine learning, and I use those very specifically doing. So what we did with the hybrid quantum computer that we're utilizing quantum technology with.
You're using a hybrid quantum computer.
Let me finish.
Yeah,
please.
let him finish, Underjoyed, and then.
Sorry. Okay.
But I do want to I do want to let you two go back and forth because I think this is very interesting.
That's fine. That's
Leo,
fine.
Go ahead.
Let me finish what I'm going to say first.
100%.
So we invented a hybrid quantum computer that we were running binary classification problems with the D-Wave supercomputer. So the D-Wave has an open access to researchers for people who are interested in quantum theory exploration. And prior to the outbreak, we were running. We were sort of on the outside of that, working on AI platform for semi-autonomous vehicles. And then the COVID happened, and and we looked at all of this, what was going on, and I kind of brainstormed what we needed to do, and so I built a computer. It was my first computer, and it's a hybrid quantum computer. It utilizes an array of quantum processors that we use to train a machine learning algorithm. And I say ours is both machine learning and artificial intelligence because consciousness plays a role. And so what we did is we presented at the Science of Consciousness conference back in September. Not one scientist disagreed with us. Many alike, not one actually challenged our claims. And then we jumped right from that into, we joined and were accepted to the X Prize. Now the X Prize, what it was is the X Prize 500K Pandemic Response Challenge, utilizing artificial intelligence to combat COVID-19. It was a global competition to see who had the most innovative models on being able to predict COVID-19 outbreak. So we designed a model, ran it through multiple training sessions with the equipment that we invented, programmed ourselves, and we did it, trained the model with the D-Wave supercomputer, and conducted the competition. There were 104 teams who joined from around the world. The teams consisted of government agencies, universities, machine learning experts, and AI companies. And then of the 104 teams, we were the only ones with the quantum algorithm. We were the only ones using quantum computers at all. So this was a conventional machine learning competition, and we showed up with 2 quantum computers. And so there was 2 different models. Does whoever asked that understand machine learning? Are you a machine learning person?
I think he's asking you, Underjoyed.
Yeah, I never even referenced machine learning. I'm questioning his knowledge on quantum computers and what he means when he talks about that he's using a hybrid quantum computing system.
I'm answering that. My question to you is, are you going to understand the words I'm using?
Yes. No, absolutely I do. Yeah.
So we created 2 different models. One was a prescriptor model, and the other one was a predictor model. The predictor model was the prescription model was a NEAT, and the other one was a LSTM, long-term, short-term memory, in which we were able to accurately, in a sandbox environment with 103 other teams, we had to upload our code, which is all on GitHub right now. You can look at it, and it had to work seamlessly. And then the sandbox was closed, and nobody had internet access. And so we developed a machine learning model that incorporated some very advanced stuff to accurately predict the COVID outbreaks in 235 regions around the world. And we had 14 specialty regions, and it all worked and tracked. And so in this competition, of the 104 teams that joined, only, 48 made it to the finals. And then the second task was to create the prescription model of this predictions and what we were going to do with it. So we, again, used their D-Wave and our own hybrid quantum computer to train a model, which then completed phase 2. Of the 104 teams, only 20 of us actually completed the entire thing. And because of this, we had the only quantum algorithm, and none of the judges. There was a panel of judges of technology experts, but none of them had any background in quantum anything. And so our model works whether you understand it or not. It's like that's how it's like Rabble.
So you're referencing quantum computers and quantum algorithms, okay? So I'd like you to explain to me what a quantum computer is and how you'd be able to use it. And actually, okay, hold on.
Did anybody else hear what I said?
Where's the quantum computer that you have access to?
I
That
just
you're
told
using
you.
right now?
Were you listening to anything I said? I said it was the D-Wave supercomputer.
That is not a quantum computer. That is a key. That is a meme word used by a company that's using quantum as a meme.
Who's moderating?
Please define to me how a quantum. How does a quantum computer work?
Hang
Please
on,
tell me how.
Underdroid?
No.
Just keep it within good faith, man. You ask your question, then he can
No.
respond.
The question is, how does a quantum computer work? Please,
Underdroid, just wait, man.
You've talked for like 30 minutes
Yeah,
using so many keywords: quantum computers, quantum algorithms. It's literally like Deepak Chopra talking about computers. You have, like, in my opinion, you have absolutely no understanding
Underdroid,
with this.
Okay, Underdroid, you made your challenge. Leo, he just wants your definition.
Wait. I think that you all were listening to that. I just answered. He asked me initially, and it doesn't really sound like he knows what he's talking about. If I say the D-Wave computer, they're the one of the most respected, one of the first quantum annealing computers in the world. You know, if he doesn't think that's a computer, he's obviously not qualified to understand my answer. And so, if everybody else heard what I said, we used our computers, which I think some of you have seen the pictures, to complete a global competition that was peer-reviewed, peer-judged, in a closed rock. That is what artificial intelligence is in machine learning.
So you're saying you're using quantum?
So you can go to my.
What quantum computer are you using?
Know what you're talking about? You can go to my GitHub page, and you can look at our code. If you want to respond to the specifics of what we've actually achieved, we have to do that. But you're just talking. You're using.
What quantum computer are you using?
I just told you, D-Wave.
D-Wave is not a quantum computer. What is a quantum computer?
Now let's settle this. Now, Leo, Underdroid is challenging you and saying it's not a quantum computer. Have you heard that critique before?
It is one of the well, you can argue if it's quantum or not. Everybody has that underlying question, and people when they came out, they were one of the first to the market, right? And people were like, "Oh, that's not quantum. That's not quantum." Go to their website right now, and they're one of the most respected, and they're one of the leading companies there in the world.
Right.
And it's yeah. So I'm not going to have a conversation with somebody who can't go to dwavesys.com and see that is a real company.
Yeah.
Okay. So instead of asking questions, I'm going to explain. Okay. A quantum computer uses a quantum computer is something that uses qubits in a superposition states that needs to be equal to absolute zero. And very few companies such as IBM actually have a working system that actually able to freeze qubits in certain states to able to, like maybe in the future able to utilize these qubits. Right now, nobody has a quantum computer because a computer also needs a BIOS to program. So there's actually
it'll be you.
In the world right now, there's absolutely no computer that uses quantum qubits to process or analyze anything, because right now nobody has figured out a program to be able to utilize anything that's able to even resemble a quantum computer.
That's 1990.
Right. Okay. So what the only quantum computers they can even remotely say that exist in the world right now are used by IBM, and I think China has also an absolute zero state that they're using. So China right now has a system that has more qubits that they're using than IBM, and this is absolutely no way useful in terms of computation. Not even IBM or China has any ability to actually utilize this. Right, so it's a very forefront of technology. So when you use words that you're utilizing quantum computers, you're utilizing a hybrid quantum computer, or using quantum algorithms, These are absolutely nonsensical statements. They're not used by
So
anybody
then,
right now.
So
if I
let's
could-
go to
so if I
Leo. Grim, we'll go to you after. We'll give Leo a chance to respond,
okay.
then we'll go to Grim.
I'm looking at it. It
So I was
says, it
having to
looks like
mediate
this
a little bit.
Just wait.
Hey,
No,
I hate-
we don't
hey,
need
what's-
mediation, guys.
Why don't you
Let
put
them
your money
go.
where your mouth is and challenge me in something? Because if anybody with even an average IQ does a little bit of work, they'll see this guy is completely wrong. And if he's calling, I can show anybody here I can send you a link with our code and links. You can go to dwavesys.com and see the quantum computing company. Log in. They've got a section there for utilizing artificial intelligence. They're very big in the business world.
How you spell it?
So I'm on it right now.
dwavesys.com. I'm running binary classifications on there for artificial intelligence. This person up here just sounds like a complete snarf, and he's just out there using sciencey terms to cause arguments. And what do they call him? Trolls. He's just trolling.
So
Those aren't even arguments.
Grim,
a simple Google research shows that not only does IBM currently have quantum computers running and running them, they have actually 5 of them, I think, and there's up to about 12,000 people a month are using them now.
I'm registered on the IBM queue and on
15 publicly available quantum computers ranging from 53 qubits in size. Their goal right now is to get something around the 500 qubits in size.
Okay.
Right.
So
There's
that's not just FYI.
Let me just jump in. University of Chicago has actually tomorrow's the info. We've been invited, or we're sitting in tomorrow to sit in on this University of Chicago program. They're launching an accelerator specifically for innovative quantum computing. And I don't know if we're going to join it, but there is no specifically defined, you could call it, structure for exactly what a quantum computer is. So while the supercomputers are processing qubits, which is a very obviously different thing to do, I'm a part of that. But any computer that utilizes quantum function that in the computation, by definition, is a quantum computer. And that opens up all kinds of stuff. So there's all types of research and applicable, tangible things that aren't exactly superconducting qubit process.
I'm going to read a bit of information here, and I want to see if anyone in the room disagrees or agrees with what's being read. So a new kind of computing, quantum computing. We experience the benefits of classical computing every day. However, there are challenges that today's systems will never be able to solve. For problems above a certain size and complexity, we don't have enough computational power on Earth to tackle them. To stand a chance at solving some of these problems, we need a new kind of computing, yada, 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 yada. Quantum computing fundamentals. All computing systems rely on a fundamental ability to store and manipulate information. Current computers manipulate individual bits, which store information as binary 0 and 1 states. Quantum computers leverage quantum mechanical phenomena to manipulate information. To do this, they rely on quantum bits or qubits. You can learn more here. And inside a quantum computer, there are a few different ways to create a qubit. One method uses superconductivity to create and maintain a quantum state. To work with these superconducting qubits for extended periods of time, they must be kept very cold. Any heat in the system can introduce error, which is why quantum computers operate at temperatures close to absolute zero, colder than the vacuum of space. So is that all?
It's right. Everything you said is right now.
And Leo, you agree?
Well, yeah, that is, I would say, incomplete but correct, in the sense that what those are describing are computers that are a particular type of quantum computer. Absolutely.
Okay, now let's focus on this different type of quantum computer. Underjoyed, are you going off an assumption, perhaps, that there is only one type of quantum computer,
Well-
or do you think there are multiple in the
Right. So you actually mentioned the biggest problem. You have to freeze these qubits at absolute zero because, like any kind of high frequency fluctuations and like will disrupt the entire state. So, like you to have a qubit, to maintain a qubit in a superposition requires so quantum computers look like computers did in the early 1950s, right? Like these massive rooms that are cooled to absolute zero. So nobody can have a quantum computer just sitting around using it.
And go ahead.
The other problem, just let me bring real quick. The other problem is that there's no program right now that there's no ability to utilize this, right? So we have very basic functions that these can do. Like we can have a bunch of meme programs split the quantum states of two different systems. There's no program able to run on a quantum computer. We have not been able to develop that. So for anyone to say that, okay, sure.
All right, let's hear.
Please
let
explain
Leo.
to me.
Go ahead, Leo.
Oh, I mean, anybody here can go to D-Wave Systems and log on. You can create an account for free, and they have training programs on there to how you can use it. This guy sounds like he's talking about he watched a couple of videos 10 years ago.
Leo, is there anything outside of the D-Wave site?
Oh, there's tons. There's universities. There's 3 major types of quantum computers in their app. There's actually, I just watched a university professor give a talk on the 6 most exciting types of quantum computers. D-Wave is just one. It's a quantum annealer, and it's slightly different than what I think the one IBM Q. I think that's a phosphorus one that requires an immense amount of energy. And
so these things are pretty big, man. How do you have one in your place?
I don't have one in my place. That's what I'm saying is I don't have that. These are computers
you have access
to. Right.
These are
So
here's a very simple question.
Quiet.
Here's
I just want to get.
Nate,
just wait,
no,
Underdroid.
hold on.
Underdroid,
Hold
just
on.
wait. Okay. I just wanted to get the response. So you don't have one, but what did you claim you have in your place?
No, I said I don't. I said we have a hybrid quantum computer. So we designed this thing we call qubit processing into our artificial intelligence model. So what this guy is a really good example, though, of people who generally they stay in the theoretical world. So they're used to talking to somebody who's only talking about philosophy and theoretical constructs, where I have inventions and hard data and things I could actually point you to. So I don't really want to engage in those types of conversations, but I'm willing to do that with the group if this stays in a moderated sense, right? Because this guy's just talking nonsense.
I think he's
not even looking at what I'm giving. So is there a way I can place? Is there a place where I can post a link to this group, or that a group can look at it?
Post a link in the live Pangburn Philosopher tab. It's just up above. So I thought, Leo, when we first met you at Kaku's event, I'm pretty sure you said you had a quantum computer in your house.
No, I said, and I can turn on my camera and show you. It's a hybrid quantum computer.
Okay.
Yeah, I took that as a computer that works with the interaction of hybrid computers, because you can't have a quantum computer in your house, but you can have a computer that interacts with the quantum computers at IBM and Google and whatever open source.
So what I described there, and I'll post these links. Let me find. Where did the link thing go? Live Pangburn philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't see where to post a link though. I'm in the thing, but I just see.
Oh,
there's a hashtag above the voice chats right there. So it says live Trav AMA, and then there's one more above, and actually put your name there. Just put here.
Oh yeah, Grim tagged you. And you can drop a link there. No, Grim just tagged you. You should have a notification there. Wherever you drop it, we'll find it.
We'll find it.
Okay, so I'll get those in a second. So what we came up with was a way to train our model, and so the quantum function we're using is called electron tunneling. It's been a study. Princeton had an entire department study dedicated to it for decades, and so we use an array processing. We created this thing called qubit processing. So we're extracting data from quantum fields and utilizing it for artificial intelligence. And those are tied into hardware. So when we have a software version of what's going on, and then we have a hardware device or software display that can show what's going on. And so we're using quantum functions, and we trained it in tandem with the D-Wave supercomputer. So we specifically use the word hybrid to not because technically it is just a quantum computer, but the general consensus of what quantum computers are is they're superconducting and very expensive. So we don't want people to think we're doing that, because we're not processing qubits at all. We're doing something completely different, and that's why we call it hybrid quantum. And so we've got a couple of press releases that go on that actually have data and links to that. And as soon as I'll put in, so we do have that. It's a tabletop supercomputer. I'm talking to you now on it. It's got 3 GPUs. It's designed specifically for artificial intelligence. Cost me about $15,000, $10,000 to $15,000.
Right. And are you claiming to have solved artificial intelligence?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I don't even think that's a thing. I would say that we created a unique model that is novel in its approach to artificial intelligence. And
I'm actually curious. I'm not memeing. I'm actually curious. Like, what is your definition of artificial intelligence? The way your application.
Well, I'll tell you it. And where is this? I want to post these links. Hold on. And for anybody that's interested, you can go to my website and see it. It's haloai.me/model. We actually have the model sitting there. And I would say, just my personal thing, I think most what people call artificial intelligence is just good programming that mimics what people think is human behavior.
Right. So it would be complex algorithms that take advantage of things like universal knowledge and through the internet, like it's able to query other aspects of things like the internet, and the algorithm is able to implement those data inputs into being able to better function that program. So in the end, it's still an algorithm, right? So that's my biggest problem with these kind of definitions of artificial intelligence.
Ours is different in that nearly all the other ones you have are what are generally considered deterministic. And so in a deterministic system, you can re-engineer and figure out exactly why a system did whatever. Let's say if it's a language system, why it chose the word it did. You can go back and figure out exactly why. Some human designed it and just cleverly looks like humans. Whereas the artificial intelligence that we're utilizing is non-deterministic in nature. So there's an element of randomness that you won't see in deterministic systems, and allows for a high level of creativity. And so I would say ours is still kind of in the infancy stages. We just designed it in the last several months.
So how would you use non-determinism to develop a system that informs you of anything?
I just gave you a very complex description of how we use it with artificial intelligence on that competition. And so we didn't just use this computer, we actually tied it in with weather data. So there's a global weather system. And then we also tied it in. Is anybody here familiar with the Global Consciousness Project? No? Okay, so
I'm actually curious how consciousness fits into your fundamental view of reality, because there seems to be you seem to be using consciousness as kind of
Yeah, but
like a word, like all the
I think you should go in and read my source material from where that comes, because it's really too complex. This is complex.
Are you? I mean, are you somehow assuming that Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics as being the
Couldn't care
like
less.
fundamental? What's that?
That's not. I'm not. I'm an inventor, right? So I'm
Okay.
working on. I'm not trying to prove a point to somebody about some abstract philosophical idea of what quantum mechanics is or is not.
So in what way does consciousness plays a role in the technology you're developing? I'm actually really curious on that.
Well, this is where actually the electron tunneling comes in. So the Hare Labs, which is the Princeton Anomalies Research Lab, studied electron tunneling for decades. And
But every particle tunnels, right? Not just electrons. This quantum tunneling is like a part of any wave function that any particle like any quark, any like. So it's not just an electron that quantum
I understand
tunnels.
that. So we have hardware devices that incorporate field effect transistors and various other forms.
Yeah. Every CPU takes into account quantum tunneling, right? Like
That's not what we're using. We're not using that. We're using specific devices that are commercially available to isolate. We're using go in and read the material. So I just posted in the Pangburn site.
I will. I'm just talking to you now. I can't just go and read it right now.
Okay, I'm trying to explain it to you, but every time I explain it to you, rather than understanding it, you're giving me some other completely nonsensical, non-related thing without really. Doesn't sound like you're listening to the words I'm saying. You're just waiting to argue.
Dal, what do you think about what Leo's talked about and Underdroid's challenges?
So I would have to say that there's a fundamental problem with language we're encountering here, because when someone uses one word, it means something else to somebody else, and it might be because
definitions.
Yeah, Leo, it might be because of your expertise, or it might be because of me. And like I get the feeling that if we really talk it out, like your definition of consciousness is something that I would say exists, but I disagree about calling it consciousness. And that's where the end point of this is. It's just the recognition that we're using words differently.
Miscommunication.
Well, my definition has a scientific and a data-based definition.
Sure, but it doesn't mean it's a different concept than what is colloquially known as consciousness.
I wouldn't say in some circles, yes, but I would say it just gives a more specific definition to what the general understanding of consciousness is.
One thing I will say, Dal, just to clarify a little bit here, is that we do not have a working theory for consciousness, right? So we have a lot of people who have different ways of describing the thing, but I mean, from a scientific perspective, we don't have a working theory.
I do. And that's actually what I published, and that's what's in our source material.
Okay.
And the model is spatial relativity and anthroreverberation.
Okay. Now I'm writing a book with my model, and I think you're just dead wrong. But we'll have to see who's right.
And this is where I want to transition to the third topic for tonight, guys. Daoism. So Daoism, Dao is a Chinese word for way, and it basically means, or a part of it, I shouldn't say it basically means, but a part of Daoism is that everyone approaches things in their own individualized way. So if we're going to call, so like we have this word consciousness, and it generally points to this thing that people definitely have. Animals most of the time have, compared to humans. Some people might disagree, but the thing that we're all trying to point to, for the most part, most animals and most life forms would have it. The problem is if you are going to change if you're going to make a definition of consciousness that can that can infinitely go outward to fit the definition of anything, it loses its meaning. It's like if I said Tao, which means way. So there's a way that my brain does stuff to produce me, to produce my mental faculties, to produce my consciousness. In the same way, I would say our solar system acts in a certain way. It has a Tao. And so if you're going to say the way of things, the Tao of things, if you're going to call that consciousness, I think you're just ultimately adding another word to describe what's going on, but you're not really describing what's going on. You're not even adding another word, you're taking a word. Changing its meaning.
So everybody should define what their view of consciousness is.
Well,
Is it spiritual? Is it emotional?
I like Patricia Churchland's interpretations and the way you just described consciousness, and that it's in a way completely reducible to the sense that, you know, it can be interpreted like the way the solar system works or the way a rock rolls down a hill. But the difference between consciousness and a rock rolling down a hill is that it's so much more complex, you know, like 2 orders of magnitude more complex, that it's very difficult to interpret how, you know, like for us to perceive so many different things, it's like very difficult to do. But in the sense, there is no difference between a rock rolling down a hill and the way consciousness is being produced in a human being. It's just many more complex processes, but a process is a process, and in the end, consciousness is just a way, you know, it's a word we use to describe, you know, something that doesn't really exist. It's just something that, you know, it's a very useful word, but maybe, you know, something that's not really fundamental. So I really like
Can I
Patricia
ask you a question?
Churchland's eliminativism.
Can I ask you a question? So it's a complex process of stimuli. So like your senses interact with something in stimuli, and that stimuli is a complex process of the mind.
Yeah, and different stimuli also interact with each other, right? So it's not linear, it's also parallel, right? So different stimuli experience things, you know, at certain times, and they also interact with each other. So that entire network creates
So
a kind
is
of web.
consciousness a level
It's
of
a
stimuli?
spider's web.
So is it a level of stimuli of the mind in state of
It,
awareness?
See,
it's
again, I
yeah,
we're
right.
naming the way of thing. Like when you start to give the name stimuli to the way of the thing, it kind of, since we already have this mental construction of stimuli, it doesn't.
When you touch something, that's a stimuli.
Yeah, so you could say, like, if you say interaction, I think that would be more akin to our language. So everything in the universe interacts with everything else, and from that emerges not only my biology, but then my consciousness that creates the separation of things and the way I perceive the world.
Yeah, but the mind mirrors the environment, though. It's not just a reaction.
Yeah, it attempts to mirror the environment as best it can with what tools we have.
So I guess a robot can theoretically be conscious if it's mimicking the environment, it's observing it, and it's mirror. No.
If
In
it
a certain way, sure.
Yeah, if it creates like at least this is the leading, well, maybe not leading, the theory of consciousness that I'm aware of being the leading theory of consciousness is the fact that it's a simulation of the world based on perceived
Well,
simulation.
what even if it's not simulation, but you can have a natural arrangement of particles that so due to the, you know, just the laws of nature, particles coalesce to the point that they reach consciousness, but those particles that were created in a naturalistic sense, you know, just due to the laws of physics, can also naturalistically create, you know, another like consciousness that are, it's very similar to them, right? So through a computer or whatever it is, but it's still a naturalistic process, right? That continues. So, you know, it's kind of a naturalistic life creating AI or technological life, it's almost a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, especially if we start mapping like at the evolutionary framework onto this. So you have the grand perspective of life as it evolves, and then since our mental picture of reality is ultimately a form of our biology, and that may or may not include quantum physics or whatever, but even if it does, fundamentally it's all a natural thing to me. And
So a
whatever
back and forth complex process interaction is consciousness.
I would call it consciousness, because when I speak of consciousness, I'm talking about my perspective, the fact that I see trees that seem separate from all the other things, and they have green, and that green is different from red. To me, these are arbitrary distinctions made by the simulation that my mind creates, and that's what I call consciousness.
Because
would
when the
agree with
mind
that.
is
I
thinking,
would
it's
agree with that.
complex. Because when the mind's thinking, it's complex, and then the mind interacts with the environment in
What
return in
would
a
you call
complex
the
way.
subconscious? What would you call the if what you're looking at, the colors you perceive is conscious? What's your perception of subconscious or unconscious?
If you're out cold,
Well, yes.
Well, you don't perceive subconscious. That's the definition of subconscious. That
Yes.
you don't perceive it.
So subconscious would be like the fact that my brain or body or whatever
Your heartbeat. Your heartbeat subconscious.
Yeah.
You don't think
Yes,
about
yes.
your heartbeat.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go. I have this mechanism that beats my heart for me, and that happens without my consciousness intervening. Where consciousness does come in is I have this model of my heart that's beating, and it's like I can hear it, and when I hear that sound, I immediately associate it with my heart. I have a vision that I can picture my heart.
But
But
it's just as important as consciousness, so they're the same thing. Subconscious and consciousness are the same thing.
yeah,
What
they're
about where do you
ultimately
put the dreams? What about dreams?
dreams are a meeting point. So because they're the same me, like the subconscious is a part of me and the conscious is a part of me, and then you could say the super ego or the ego or whatever. All these things are a part of me. They interact, and so when I sleep at night, my brain goes about stimulating its own visual cortex as if I was getting data. So I have this subconscious phenomenon, but I can make decisions in my dream. And not only that, if I practice enough, I can take control of my visual cortex in my dream and start just warping reality at will every night. And that's fun.
So you
And
would put the subconscious in the realm of dream states.
Dream states that the subconscious is whatever you don't have control over. The conscious is whatever you do. And I think to a degree, we have the ability to control our visual cortex. It's just one of those meeting points where it's like breathing. So when sometimes you choose to breathe, and sometimes it happens of its own accord. In the same way, when you look out at anything, you get a vision of it in your mind, and that vision seems to happen of its own accord. But if you meditate long enough, you can warp your vision. If you stare at a thing long enough, you can warp your vision, and that, while also happening unconsciously, is in a way, if you try to do it, you can do it consciously. You can consciously hallucinate at the same time.
Can we do a quick thought experiment?
Go for it.
Okay, so you're kind of verbally describing a something I used to do in art galleries, and I've done as an experiment in kind of just like understanding consciousness a little bit better. But if you can imagine, and if you have a computer that can do this, it's kind of interesting. But if you can stand in front of a large video screen that's just got an even field of static, right? If you stand there and look at it, within about 30 seconds, what I generally see is patterns. And there are patterns that you can actually consciously, like windmills turning in clockwise motion, you could consciously make them turn in a counterclockwise motion.
Yeah.
And so you're visually looking at this thing, it's happening, but it's not there, right? You know it's seeing there, but this person sitting next to you is looking at the exact same thing, but the patterns they're seeing is different. And every single person that comes up, they might have a similar experience, but the patterns they're going to see emerge on the TV will be dependent on their state of mind. Some people see triangles first, some people see windmills, some people see drops and blobs. I've heard lots of different things. So in the areas of conscious, subconscious, and dream states, where would you put that kind of phenomena? Because that does kind of describe. You said you could affect what you're seeing, and that is one of the ways that I found you can do it.
Yeah, like if you're driving by a field of planted crops that are all planted in a line and you see those different rows, but as you drive by, you kind of focus and you can almost shift the direction it looks like everything's going because it's the constant speed. I tend to think that that is you interacting with the conscious portion of your visual cortex, and then you would also have the subconscious portion, which would generally be the thing giving you line and color and having trouble reading that situation. Like when you have trouble when you have trouble figuring out what you see, I think your conscious mind is allowed to play into it a little bit. When you see a shadow out of the corner of your eye, if you're driving and afraid to run over an animal like my girlfriend really is, you will immediately think that shadow's a dog and you will see it in a dog shape and you'll go and stop really fast. But at the same time, if I'm doing that and I see a shadow out of the corner of my eye well, maybe not me, but if someone does and they're super into ghosts and conspiracy theories or whatever, they might get freaked out, think they're being haunted by a ghost, and they'll speed way up, try to get away from the shadow that's attacking them. And I think that all of these sorts of scenarios go to show that there is this interplay between conscious and subconscious, and they influence each other.
Are you familiar with what the alpha wave is?
I've heard the term, but please explain.
Alpha brainwave state. Your brain operates on 5 major frequencies: alpha, beta, theta, delta, and gamma. Alpha is kind of that in-between state where it's kind of a dreamlike state. When you wake up in the morning, you still half asleep, or right before you go to sleep. That's generally where you dream and where you can take control of your dreams in that alpha state. And so that kind of is that bridging gap between the conscious and the subconscious, and you kind of let go. And that's kind of where you are when you can go into a meditative state.
Yeah, and that's why I've never heard of that description before, or I've heard of it because I've heard the words, but I don't remember it being explained to me that way. But it's at least having enough experience with meditation, I know. And not only that, hallucinogens, I know that I have the ability to affect my own visual field.
Absolutely. Have you had a third eye activation?
What was that?
Have you had a third eye activation? Do you know what that is?
You mean, I mean, I've had some pretty freaking out there experiences, but it depends on what you mean, like ego death or.
No, I mean the way I can describe it literally is, when you close your eyes, and I would say like I've experimented with some hallucinogenics for spiritual quests, things like that, including ayahuasca and what would you call it, DMT, right? So I had the trippy experiences, right? But that's not what I mean when I say the third eye activation, because I can experience third eye activation without any hallucinogens whatsoever. And in my studio here, I have a device that has brainwave states. I use this in various installations, and we can induce meditative states into people in a pretty quick amount of time with any alpha, beta, theta, or gamma, or not gamma, but delta wave. And I think it really is in talking about the science of consciousness. it would behoove people, I think, to have a pragmatic understanding of neuroscience and kind of the history of neuroscience, because it's really grounded in the spiritual experience. Would anybody be interested in hearing how the alpha wave was invented and by who and why? Or is that off topic?
Can I ask one thing before you do that? I'm interested. Just theoretically, the level of knowledge and logic of the mind, where if you take in you don't just have your perspectives, but you take in the perspectives of many others and add it to your own, doesn't that advance your mind in level of consciousness because you're taking in the perspectives of many?
It could, absolutely. I wouldn't definitively say it absolutely does, because like I would say you could take into consciousness of other people it's really negative and bad that doesn't.
Perspectives, viewpoints.
Yeah, just because you take in somebody's viewpoint doesn't mean it's valid or it's gonna be like I don't want to take in a bunch of viewpoints that are completely.
I'm not talking about the validness or any of that. I'm just talking about perspectives.
Yeah, in general, I would agree with that. Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so you grow yourself as a person, technically.
Say that again.
You're growing yourself as a person.
Always.
Because if you're adding other people's minds to yours, so that will multiply you.
Constantly. Matter of fact,
whether their views are shit or not, you know.
My group, well, no, my group, we actually, our name is Peace. It's an acronym, and Peace, it actually it describes the neuroscience behind what we do, but it stands for People Evolve as Consciousness Expands.
Because what you're doing is you're taking their neural connections and you're adding it to yours.
Yep.
And another person's neural connection, and you're downloading it into yours, whether you agree with them or not. But I
don't know what you mean by downloading.
Well, I mean, if I tell you 1 + 1 = 2, I got that from my mind, and I pretty much, and then you get what I'm saying?
Well, that's a good example of like that doesn't really add to me. I already know that. And if I sit through, let's say I sit through a lecture,
I don't mean like that.
Very little interest in.
Okay, I show you something you haven't seen before. How's that?
Yeah.
I don't know, like I don't know, some kind of cup or whatever.
By definition, I would say that results in this is what I say. Like we talk about consciousness expansion is the firing of new neural pathways, and those have direction and strength. The direction is just like where it's going, like what you're visually perceiving, and the strength is the emotional content behind it, whether it be fear, attraction, or whatever it is. So you have that ability. So let's just say you just threw out to me 17 words, right? And 17 words, and it was just complete nonsense. But they were words, and so let's say in my consciousness expansion, it went up by 5%. Whereas you could also put 17 words together and you just blow my mind and like open up a new whole pathway of consciousness or thinking about a problem, or you help me solve a problem with a different perspective, then that same expansion of consciousness might be 90 or 100%.
Yeah, that state of awareness is reality. It has to equate to reality.
But it's a two-way street, so it's not just throwing stuff out, it's what the receiver perceives.
Yeah.
So it's not just a numbers game. There's
your connection of reality.
This was why
of information and different perspectives can heighten your state of awareness, of consciousness, state of being.
That the fact that other people's perspectives when they're listening to something matters is why I wanted to hammer home that consciousness point, because when you say consciousness, it just gets people thinking of things.
Well, I can agree with that. It does do that, but I would say that we're not having the same conversation. When I say that, I have a very specific meaning. So other people can have all kinds of debates back and forth, but my meaning is describing a physical system that we're interacting with. So when somebody says, how does your computer work? How does consciousness affect it? You have to define the system. And whoever was the mind military officer, is he still here? Who was it that was in the Navy? He was a Navy officer.
That was Dr. Doolittle.
Dr. Doolittle. All right, he's gone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right, he would probably get this. Probably really quick because I mean I use Navy analogies all the time. But so I would just say like when I use it, I'm not actually I would say like in the discussion of consciousness, my specific use of consciousness and when I'm using it does not necessarily uh, negate anybody else's philosophical perspective or conversation, and in fact, it might actually support it in an immense way from the scientific perspective. But if you're describing a scientific system, you have to assign variables and titles, just like a QPU program, you know. And so when I use that word consciousness, I'm not using it in a philosophical sense. That's all. That's my just saying. It's just describing a physical system and how a person interacts with that system.
And the psyche of the mind and knowledge
And
and
the state of mind has
and
a
the
lot.
emotions and logic.
The state of mind has a lot to do with it. So, for example, if somebody were here in the Bay Area, I'm going to make a video on this soon when I probably with my partner because we just upgraded our studio system here, and so like we could hook up EEGs and EMGs to somebody's body, right, and hook it up to and have it record directly onto our computer and put them into a meditative state, and we can measure the physiological changes their body goes through and actually integrate that into a computer program, doing all kinds of stuff. But the cool thing is that people can just see what their body does when they go in the state. Because oftentimes, if you want to go into the state, it's a suspended state, so you don't want to be aware of what's going on. So being able to record that is very, very valuable.
By the way, one thing, whenever we talk about religion in the past of text and stuff like that, that's why I always want to include the times of the environment and the state of mind in knowledge and emotion and how of knowledge and logic and how that might equate to how people are emotionally and how they think. You know what I mean? Instead of just
and I think you can
because those things determine things. They're factors.
If you look back on the history of architecture and in places of worship, you will see commonalities there. And because these people knew that when you bring people together and create that energy, it's going to be greater focused. And that's why churches and stuff are designed the way they are. So this is I think I say this sometimes. What we're doing is we're dumbing reality down to the PhD level and taking things that people have known inherently for a long time, and we're just now having the scientific tools to really understand how they work. Because if you look at, exactly what Michio Kaku was talking about and a lot of others, they're describing unseen forces, right? So when you're talking about consciousness, if you agree that it's a force and it exists, then it's worth having the discussion is like, how do those forces work exactly? What's the pragmatic mechanisms between how they actually function? And then you blend that with a philosophical perspective that's understandable, and you got the Holy Grail, right? And
Yeah, it's not about making claims. It's what people think, and you just rationalize from there. It's not like absolute, like, oh, no, this is this, and God says it is, or whatever. You just rationalize and put them different viewpoints together, and see
well,
what
it depends.
sticks.
It depends on what the science is. If you're talking about science with data and things like that, then that's a different conversation. And that's where I roll it back to in what we're working on. Because again, has anybody here had not an out of body experience, but like a unexplainable communication with somebody at a distance? Sort of like somebody, the phone rings and you're like, this has got to be my mom. I just know it's my mom, and it's your mom, or something like that. Or
I have a theory on that.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Well, minds that think the certain way, you can expect in predeterminism that other person that is of that same mind would do the same. So you can already know what a person is going to do if you know them very well. You grew up with, you know what I mean? I mean, like if I'm playing soccer and I was a professional on the field, and I played with my brother my entire life, and he was also a member of that. I'll probably just cut it back in the center. You know what I mean? While I'm running away or whatever, and you know, surprisingly, you know, he's there, like because you just have that connection. You get what I
Just
mean?
know
It's
that
not telepathic, but
that's
it's kind of
synchronicity.
like if you have a similar pattern of how you think in relation to how another person think, you could kind of connect with each other in a way, but not. You get what I'm saying? Like people do that with that example of you being a professional soccer player and you played soccer your whole life with your brother and you just pass it, you didn't even look, you just knew. You get what I'm saying? At that point, at that time, likely be in that position.
I had that when I was a little kid. My brother and we were like the star basketball kids,
Okay.
and we could just like the Mormons invite. We were Catholic kids, and we didn't have teams, but the Mormons invited us to. They actually let us into their church because we were so good at basketball, and we had that connection. And I think that's what teams do. The military does that. All teams do, and that's that connection of consciousness.
I see. So it's just instinct in a way. You don't have to think.
Total instinct. Total instinct. Totally. You want to hear a funny Navy story about consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay, this is kind of funny. I'm in boot camp. I go to boot camp in Chicago. They run us through, you know, you haven't slept in a week. You finally get all your inoculations and you're getting ready to hit the tarmac and learn how to march. Freezing cold, wintertime in Chicago, right? And so there's 80 men grueling. Our heads are shaved. First time out on the field, and the commanding officers like yelling at us, just like in the movies, you know, getting ready to march, and nobody's marching. They're like, okay, everybody go left, right, left, and it's just a clusterfuck all the way around. And we struggled out there for like at least an hour for him to show us that we just had no idea what we were doing, couldn't do it. Then did the most unexpected, one of the gayest things I ever could expect coming out of this. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense at all. I mean, like, state of mind at 18 years old in a group full of men. He says, all right, everybody take off your gloves and hold hands. So like we're all like big tough military guys going through boot camp. And he says, hold hands. You're gonna be like, you gotta be kidding me, hold hands. Like nobody wanted to do it. And he's like, get out, and he yells at it, and we hold hands, and he says, all right, we're all gonna march forward together, and we are gonna hold hands until you blah blah blahs learn how to march. And we learned how to march so fast, it boggled my mind. I was like, how is that even? By the end of that first day, we were working in unison in one day. And it had to do with that consciousness. And I really think it had to do, it really wasn't just about not wanting to hold hands. Is like that first time you hold hand, it was really uncomfortable. And it was like you could feel energy coming through that. Because I had never done anything like that, right? But we were walking, so it's 80 people completing a circuit, all sharing the same mind. So we were creating like a mind meld operation. And by the
end not wanting to hold hands.
Right, but by the end of the day, it wasn't so weird. Like we were holding hands, we would let go when we were doing turns and left, and then we would come back and hold hands to keep us in line. And later on in life, I actually became a ballroom dance instructor. And learning how to march and sing and walk and talk and do all that at the same time was a very valuable lesson on that.
So I'm just asking, you think that there's something hypothetical in a subconscious level that was making you guys not coordinate with each other? And when you were forced to hold hands?
I would say holding hands made a serious connection that was more powerful than I could have. Like if somebody had described to me what would have been the effect of that, I would not have guessed the effect would have been that powerful. I don't know if you can imagine 80 clunky men, kind of, and a lot of these like big, awkward football player types, not very coordinated, lots of different body styles and types. So and we were all exhausted. And in one day, we just like, oh my God. I mean, obviously, that was the plan, and we weren't the first people they've done this to, but it was nothing like I had ever seen or imagined would have happened. But that was holding hands with that many guys in that kind of environment. Just it was a bonding experience.
Can I ask you a question? You think that there might have been something deep on a psychological level that made you guys not be able to coordinate to begin with, and holding hands override that? The connection of holding hands override that that breakdown that was making you guys not fall in line. It's kind of like, okay, we all don't want to do that shit again. We want to hug and hold hands and shit. So.
Well, no, I wouldn't put it quite like that. I wouldn't
you
say
guys were on the same
I would say
page.
that was a radical shortcut we didn't expect coming, right? But I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say like there was anything wrong with the group before that. It was just a natural. You would imagine if you bring 80 people together that have never worked, learning how to march is going to take some time.
That's an interesting mind trick. I mean, you could probably do that yourself, utilize it yourself, like tell the guys a bunch of hugs to hug each other. And
I did it as a dance instructor. I specialize in teaching people who are getting married to dance. I specialize in teaching big awkward guys how to dance well. And yeah, I did that. And hey, I got to get going though. I appreciate the time, and I'm sorry I just sort of jumped in here at the last minute, but I do want to invite everybody to continue the conversation. I'll tune in when I can. And about the X Prize, we've got that going on. I posted some of my links in the Pangburn site, and that's links to our model, our code, and a press release that discusses some of our data.
Awesome. We'll definitely take a look. Thanks, Leo.
All right.
Leo, before you go real quick, I want to try to get you to show up to, I think it's our next guest, Stephen Wolfram, because I think
he'll be coming on in, I think, May. We're hoping for May. Yeah.
But he's a computer scientist who's been doing it for like 40 years or something, and he has a theory of everything based on computation. So I think hearing you guys talk about it would be pretty interesting.
That's cool. I just want to be clear, though. I don't have a theory of everything. I have an invention that unifies quantum mechanics and relativity and time, the time dilation detector, and that instance. Me personally, I'm interested in contributing to somebody else doing a theory of everything and participating in that, but I'm not. That's not a pursuit that I'm involved in.
Well, I'd like to hear you guys talk about either what you got going on or how.
Sure, I would love that. I would just love that. But I just wanted to be clear that I'm not arguing about my theory of everything. I don't have one.
Oh, Leo, one thing. I liked your perspective of the different minds in the young mind. I kind of have that view of people perspectives being utilized no matter how, like it's all important, and in adding to things to get different viewpoints, you know what I mean, when it comes to acknowledging problems, because when you have a million perspectives versus 10 perspectives, you get what I'm saying, it's a good thing. So I see that like liberal humanism of investing in people to add their viewpoints, and when it comes to approaching things, it would make things advance more quicker.
Yeah, I would agree with that in general. I mean, I certainly though limit my exposure to, time is valuable, and I think I can give you maybe a pragmatic example, like I did with my brother in the adding of perspectives. Like I have a private team that we worked with to do the X Prize, and my partner in particular, she and I have developed a what I would kind of call like a symbiotic mind, almost like when we look at our work, we complement each other and we can finish what each other's doing and fill in the gaps for each other without stepping on each other's toes. So what I'm saying is what we do academically and with computers and stuff is kind of the same thing that my brother and I used to do playing basketball.
Yeah, because naturally that is in what we call it within nature. The different perspectives of the genome in adaptation, you get what I'm saying? In variation, it makes you more likely to survive and move on. You get what I'm saying? That's how come if you screw your sister for many centuries, you're actually matching your DNA and you're literally devolving yourself, literally. And the same thing is of the mind, because the mind is a substitute for humans having to evolve genetically in order to overcome things. We can have many viewpoints of reality in the mind that will change in adaptation when it comes to a problem. Like if you can't have one idea in how to approach a problem, many perspectives will more increase those odds in approaching a problem and overcoming it, and more likely, you know what I mean? Being able. So the mind itself is it's a substitute for evolution, and the mind itself is.
Nivik, let Leo go. He said he had to run.
Yeah, that's all right. And I am on the I have a paid subscription to the website. I signed up for that, and I do plan on writing actually a review on Michio Kaku's book.
Nice.
And I'll post that because he did during this chat. He did say, now, like I said, this is, I think, a flaw in the scientific method here and how people actually approach it. But when I said, we've unified the laws of quantum mechanics and relativity in a form of artificial intelligence, his response was, well, if you can fit that into a equation, and that's what he's out there popping up, right? He's going on his book tour, and he continuously invites that. He wants to know from other people, if you have something relevant, send it in. And so what I want to do as a group, my partner are definitely going to do this. Anybody that's interested in this, because what I want to do is get him to be one of the judges on the X Prize. And it's a really big deal. It's like a $10 million prize. Obviously, if we actually created a working model of consciousness that a group of scientists could agree upon, at least works in a pragmatic sense, that'll go quite a ways to, I think, everybody having a better understanding of that theory of everything. I wouldn't say it's all of it, but X Prize is willing to put up $10 million to find out. So I think that's pursuing.
One quick comment. What do you think of my view of the state of the mind? Taking many perspectives is a state of evolution, and the more it expands is evolution.
Well, that is in our name. Go to the links I just posted. Our company's P-Sync. People evolve as consciousness expand. As human beings, this is why I'm a transhumanist, in that I believe we're in a constant state of evolutionary growth, and we can do only so much with our body, but what we can do to expand our consciousness is pretty massive. It's greater than what we can do with our body. And so we're in a constant state of evolution. And we have the ability to evolve as human beings, and technology today can accelerate that.
The more connection of the realities, the more we in taking in knowledge and rationalizing it as information is your higher state of consciousness.
I'm not quite sure what you mean about taking in multiple realities. But
yeah.
No. Taking in information, in rationalizing that logically, in connecting with reality around you, the environment around you. That's your growing of higher state of consciousness.
Well, I would say doing those activities definitely expand your consciousness, definitely. But when higher states of consciousness, that's a whole different.
Dal, thanks, Leo.
All right, hey, I got to go, but I'll tune in again whenever I can. When do these sessions happen? Is it every night or?
Every day around the same time we started today. So every day on Saturdays we're a bit earlier. We start at 1 p.m. Pacific, but yeah, every day around this time we're on. So
Cool.
New topic every day. Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks,
All right.
man.
Take care.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Dal, have we explored everything you wanted to explore today?
I think you have to kick me out for some reason. When I close Discord, it stays on.
Oh, you need to go if you go back into Discord, you gotta X yourself out of the room. I can.
Okay, I gotta start back up.
Here, I think I can just kick. There we go.
Yeah,
Oh,
I did it.
Oh, okay.
I connected him. So he should still be in the server.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. So, did you really get to Daoism as much as you wanted to?
I got to it a little bit. I got to the reason it's called Daoism, which is just it's Chinese for way, so it's wayism, and how it's kind of similar to what Nivik keeps broaching on, which I believe is a form of perspectivism, which is just the idea that everyone's perspective harbors some sort of truth, and so learning that perspective is a good thing and increases your knowledge. I think Taoism does a little bit different. It's more about the recognition that that we're all usually, outside of someone who's legitimately making stuff up or insane, we're all attempting to describe the same thing, and it's usually either a differently constructed concept or the language itself that we're using that gets in our way. And that was the main point I wanted to broach, because a lot of Taoism, like there's other concepts I could get into, like Wu Wei,
Right.
which is essentially the idea that you should be able to do things without effort. So if I exercise, I should exercise because I want to exercise. I shouldn't have to force myself to go to the gym in the same way. So instead of maybe going to the gym, I should go for a walk or
Right.
something I don't dread. Another way you can take it is like Taoists tend to they relate it to the physical because they're a sort of naturalist religion. They worship nature to a degree.
Right.
So they might say the water flows down the hill without effort. It doesn't try to push itself down the hill. It just kind of goes along. And that's how you should, instead of attempting to fight society, you should utilize society or gravity to do what you need. Utilize the force that's there.
Interesting. Well, I'm gonna call that for the show today. We will jump into the after show room, Trav's Tavern, right there. If you want to join us there, it's just a place to hang out and get to know each other. And we'll catch you guys tomorrow. Is Eliyahu's education day. Well, it'll be interesting to see what he wants to chat about. All right, and as always, let art and science inspire.